Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Market Open. We are live. It is Monday, August 10th. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We are starting off the second week of August when it comes to trading. And boy, has a lot happened over the weekend that we are going to have to discuss. There's a variety of earnings that we have this week that we're going to have to discuss. The majority of earnings we're basically done with and happened last week and the week before. Obviously, we've got NVIDIA left in a couple weeks, which is going to be the really big one. But in terms of what we've got going on in the pre-market, there's a variety of different things. Also, today after the bell, you've got HIMS, Rocket Lab, and ASTS. Those are going to be pretty big earnings. You had a couple of software companies in the pre-market that we'll talk about. And then throughout the week, you've got CoreWeave and Nebius. So you're also going to have, obviously, a variety of the neoclouds that are going to be reporting earnings, and that's going to be important as well. Now, over the weekend, you had a bunch of different macro updates happen, which is why you're seeing some of the red in the pre-market in a variety of different sectors and some of the green. We'll talk about all the different things going on. The S&P 500 did hit all-time highs last week, effectively closed at all-time highs. So the first week of August tends to be a crappy month for the markets. The first week was incredible. I mean, the first week, outside of a few stocks and a few sectors, even one of the sectors that got hit the most, space, is making a comeback right there. SpaceX back to its IPO price in the pre-market, almost hit 140 right now, 135.28, up about 1.5%. Rocket Lab was 85. You started to see some rebound in a variety of different sectors, including the semiconductors. And so this week's going to be really important because this is going to be one of those weeks in August where we determine if August as a month is actually going to be relatively strong for equities, or are we going to be dealing with some of the same pains that we had over the past couple of weeks. AMD right there, that's down in the pre-market. Microsoft hit 500 last week. Bloom's down a little bit in the pre-market. The memory names made some buzz over the weekend. We will be talking about the latest updates on those. Micron right there down about 1.49%. SanDisk down about 1%. NVIDIA basically flat in the pre-market. Palantir had a massive day on Friday. Ended the day up 10% after being up 30% a couple days before. It's the first 40% week that Palantir has had since April of 2025. It's still down 6% year to date, which shows you how aggressive the drawdown became after a 40% week, and it's still down year to date. But overall, Palantir back to being a $400 billion company, and software in general starting to come back as the market has, I think, realized that the whole software apocalypse stuff wasn't necessarily real. So we got a lot to talk about, a lot to get into. Zuck's made some headlines as well in the pre-market, releasing an open source model with open weights. So we will talk about that, see what implications that has in the broader AI trade. And then unfortunately, I thought this would kind of calm down over the weekend, but it didn't. Oil's up. And because oil is up, you are seeing some of the high beta names sell off. We'll talk about the Iran updates. I mean, some updates were good. Some updates were not really that good. And I think we're stuck more in a state of purgatory when it comes to Iran in terms of figuring out what actually is going to be resolved. Also, Buffett made some news over the weekend, so we'll talk about that. But yeah, we don't have the type of commentary from either Iran or the United States that would lead you to believe definitively that we are getting this war to come to an end. So until then, and hopefully this week, but until then, you know, oil prices might still have to go up a little bit more, and obviously that would affect bond yields and then the equity markets. All right, let's get into it. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you all for being here. I hope everyone had a good weekend. Got to relax this weekend. Had some family come over from India. They're going to be staying with us over the next couple of weeks, so always nice to see some family. Yes, Micron will be having an event at 10 a.m. We're not going to be watching the event, but I'm sure I'll be getting updates immediately based on what Sanjay says. I think it's with one of the big banks. They're having a conference, and so, you know, quite frankly, they might say some stuff that's new information in regards to HBM, long-term agreements, all this stuff, and that could also obviously affect how that stock does when we get into the print. Do they bring you some sweets? Yes, they did indeed bring some sweets. I'm not the biggest fan of Indian sweets. Like, I like them, but if it's Indian sweets or American sweets, like, it's American sweets, American desserts all day. But we took them to the Cheesecake Factory yesterday, which I don't think they've ever been to. Yeah, they haven't, because one of them came a few years ago, but I don't think we took them there. So American classic Cheesecake Factory. AbCellera, yeah, congrats to my AbCellera bulls. You know, this is in the too hard to understand bucket for me because it's in the biotech space, but the phase 2 results went good. It's kind of a hit or miss, right? Either the results go good or the results go bad. There's actually a couple of other biotech companies over the past week that have like gone down 60% because their phase results 1, 2, and 3 just didn't live up to the hype. AbCellera's did this morning. So 31% right there on AbCellera. This is kind of the risk you take playing with a biotech. If the drug works, if the patients are cured to an extent, or at least there's not any anomalies that would cause something bad to happen, the market gives you the benefit of the doubt and gives you more runway to continue building out the ecosystem. The stock is only a $2 billion company, so a relatively small company, but retail has been doing incredible due diligence on this. And phase 2 results today went really positive. That's why that stock up 30% right here. All right, so let's get into it. First off, I think we'll start with the memory trade. Let's start with some analysis on the memory trade. The memory trade got into a lot of question over the weekend for a variety of reasons, not just retail having different thoughts and perspectives on it. Obviously, retail has been a big component of the memory trade, but also the sell side coming out. I think we saw this last week after SanDisk earnings. The market kind of, at least the sell side forces on Wall Street, reduced all their price targets, had some downgrades, even though their price targets are still pretty substantial. A lot of them kind of became pseudo bearish. And the question was why? What necessarily changed? And we'll talk about some of the things the sell side is afraid of, but you had one of the biggest memory influencers. This guy works at Citrini Research, and he, I believe, is in South Korea. He went bearish short term over the weekend. And so 3 main reasons that he engaged in some bearish arguments. Number 1, he said Korean leverage ETFs are effectively dead. LPs are now in a redemption rush, which could create additional sell-on flow. Kospi was basically flat last night, so nothing too crazy on Kospi. But his first argument is, look, a lot of the leverage in SK Hynix and Samsung that created all the momentum in South Korea, if you take a look at this chart right here from Bloomberg, he is absolutely right about that. I mean, you have seen the trading volume decimate over the past 2 weeks. Now, I don't know if this is the only reason why the memory stocks were going crazy in South Korea. I mean, if literally it was just leveraged ETFs as the fundamental basis for why they went up, that would be a bit concerning. I don't think that's the case, but nonetheless, that's one of his arguments for why you're seeing some pain here. Number 2 is this analysis we talked about last week, or this headline, and it's picking up more steam over the weekend. So NVIDIA is nerfing Rubin Ultra's HBM and responding with optics, tying multiple racks together so that even if Rubin Ultra's per rack performance is not superior to Rubin, at the cluster level optics, the Rubin Ultra cluster holds an edge over the Rubin cluster. This holds even if Rubin Ultra's HBM nerf is a supply problem rather than a demand problem. So it's not about NVIDIA not wanting to have more HBM. It's rather NVIDIA recognizing that because there is such a massive supply-demand imbalance around HBM, they are using optics, which is why you've seen Lumentum and AAOI and Coherent and AXTI and Corning and all these names start to get a bid. Effectively, his argument is there's going to be a short memory, long optics trade that is going to take place. And optics are at the NPO level a way that NVIDIA can still make their GPUs have incredible levels of performance, even if they don't stack them with HBM, because it's not that they don't want the HBM, it's just that there's not enough HBM. And then their third argument, this is really the sell side argument, consensus is forming that memory prices will peak within the next 2 quarters. So I did some research over the weekend to try to understand what is the sell side actually saying when it comes to memory. And the sell side split, because you've got some of the sell side making the argument that, like, effectively memory prices are going to peak pretty soon. And once those memory prices peak, you're not going to be able to get the type of year-over-year earnings growth that you want to see, even with the long-term agreements. I mean, if Micron had 60% gross margins versus 85% gross margins last quarter, their EPS would go from $24 to $5, $5.72. So it's one of those things where, the only argument you have then is the buybacks help maintain the stock. If the margins actually fall dramatically, now one could argue there is so much demand that we don't even know about, that the margin shouldn't be falling anytime soon because obviously there's not enough supply coming online. But that's not what some of the sell side is saying, right? The sell side is saying that this is actually going to peak relatively soon. Now, they could be wrong. They've been wrong on a lot of things. But if that's the sentiment, then obviously that's what keeps the stocks a bit more range bound. Basically what's been happening with NVIDIA. Bernstein right here said memory pricing alone is driving 70% of the year-to-date semiconductor revenue that you're seeing in the entire sector. And so that's another, reason there's a little bit of fear, because if this is the kind of core element of the growth, and if the growth slows down, then the revenue in for the semiconductor industry itself slows down. Then you had Morgan Stanley post this over the weekend saying DRAM and NAND Q over Q contract prices are going to peak by the end of this year, early next, or they've effectively already peaked, and that they're going to continue to go down. This is part of the reason why SanDisk ended up falling after earnings. They beat decisively, but the guide Q over Q for next quarter was lower than the increase of the guide from Q1 to Q2. And that is where all the questions started coming in of, have you guys peaked? Where do you think the floor is? And then SanDisk was saying, well, we think there's a $500 billion TAM going into 2027 that we're going to be able to capture a big part of. We're already returning $14 billion of cash via share buybacks, which is what I think Micron at 10 a.m. is effectively going to say, right? They're going to be like, hey, we are generating a lot of cash, hundreds of billions of dollars of cash. Our PE is cheap because the market doesn't think that the growth is sustainable, which is why the sort of low PE argument continues to be said around why these stocks are fundamentally cheap, which I agree with. It's just a question of how that cash is going to be used to be able to continue to drive shareholder returns, either by building new supply, which potentially could affect those long-term agreements when it comes to the margins there, or by giving back via dividends or share buybacks. And then it's up to the market to say how much they care about share buybacks as the basis for continuing to invest in memory trade. SK Hynix in a couple of days is also expected, and Samsung, to announce a special dividend with buybacks as well. And so you've got Micron engaging in that. SanDisk already said that last week. SK Hynix and Samsung SanDisk already said that last week. So you have the two South Korean companies expected to announce that this week around what they think about memory and how they're going to use their buybacks. And then it's just up to the street to figure out how to interpret, where memory pricing ultimately needs to go. So you've had the price targets. Citibank also came out, and Citibank's been the most iffy on Micron back and forth. I mean, they upgraded them, then they downgraded, they upgrade, they downgrade. Over the weekend, they downgraded again. Now they still have a buy, but they took their price target down by like $400 or $500. And so, yeah, I think the memory trade right now is very similar to NVIDIA in that NVIDIA stayed range bound for a while. I don't know if memory stays range bound. I don't think it needs to go lower. Obviously, like these stocks have been decimated so hard from the top that you would think that they can relax for a little bit and kind of stay range bound here. If the market actually wants to take them lower and potentially flip into optics, which are all green in the pre-market, I think it would be the market switching from one bottleneck to another bottleneck. And the question would be, does the market go short the memory names to fund the long, potentially software, maybe that trade flips, or the long optics trades? And I think we don't have enough data to figure that out yet. But the majority of the market continues to be bullish on memory. It's just now the fears about prices peaking and supply coming online, could end up being a bit more bearish in the short term. I think Chris Camillo's take over the weekend was actually one of the best takes when it came to memory. And it's not something that original, but it is something that I think everyone needs to remember, which is that if there is an innovation in AI in and of itself, that is something we don't fully know about yet, AKA there's another ChatGPT moment for AI. There's more agents, there's more robotics. There's something that happens over the coming quarters that explodes memory demand, and the supply-demand imbalance once again is not going to peak because there's simply going to be too many use cases for AI that is going to require not only more memory chips, but more NVIDIA GPUs, more Intel and AMD CPUs, all those things. And so I think that's the more optimistic way to kind of take the risk reward on memory. The more pessimistic way, or at least not pessimistic, but cautious view is, hey, you want to see how the numbers play out. You want to see how the street reacts to Micron earnings, because there's not the type of FOMO that you have to get in, because the majority of the move has happened. And now, a run to all-time highs at 1250, it's nice 30% from here, but how much risk are you taking to get that 30%? Does that affect the other high beta elements of the market? I don't know. So far, market's at all-time highs. Space is up in the pre-market. I mean, memory used to be the linchpin that would affect all of high beta. Obviously, Nebius has been kind of following Micron, given Burry has shorted both of them. And, the neoclouds have followed some of the memory names, but Nebius, CoreWeave have earnings this week. I think theoretically, if they have a really good earnings, they could break out from memory. And then you got to see how the other names, optics, have obviously broken out from the algorithm that has kept them within the memory trade. And the market has started to think of it in a bit of a different way. So I think this week is going to be a very important week, not only for overall equities, but to see if high beta momentum catches a bid again, which would hopefully get the S&P into that 7,800 range. Which are the names that are going to be participating if the market actually breaks away different sectors that have their own version of seeing the trajectory of growth, and if the market wants to allocate capital to that. By the way, speaking of Intel, they are diluting by $15 billion. They put out a shelf offering today to raise $15 billion. I think if you're a true Intel fan or shareholder, or you've been there for the beginning, you already knew this was going to happen. For them to expand the foundry business, they need more capital. And yeah, Trump and Jensen have given them a boost over the past couple of years, but they're going to need substantially more money if they're going to actually compete on a meaningful way and become, the TSMC of America. So the stock's down 5% right here. I don't think the 15 billion dilution is bearish, especially for a company that has delivered, exceptional returns over the past 2 years. And obviously they've nailed earnings growth, but nonetheless, if you're going to, dilute by $15 billion. the market's definitely gonna have some fear right there. So Intel, that's down about 4.5%, and then the memory stocks are also slightly down in the pre-market as well. Is Archer up in the pre-market? Archer is, whoa, 18%. I did not see the headline on Archer. Is this something to do with Anduril? Archer is acquiring Boeing's Whisk Aero, Skygrid, and In Situ in an aerospace AI deal. Boeing's taking an equity stake in Archer. In Situ generates $200 million in annual revenue, while the acquisitions are expected to expand their aerospace and defense AI platform. Okay, so 3 acquisitions Archer engaged in today, and Boeing now is a shareholder. Archer obviously has a very large partnership with Anduril. They unveiled their defense eVTOL 2 weeks ago, which also got a lot of people excited about the street. Wow, okay. I mean, look, you have players like Boeing taking an equity stake, and you have legacy defense contractors with Boeing, and then you have new defense contractors with Anduril. They're also adding $200 million. I mean, that's the real reason the street's excited. This is a company that barely does a couple million in revenue, adding $200 million on a $4 billion market cap. One could argue still expensive, but at least you're seeing some growth. Even if it's inorganic, that growth is what, can finally get some numbers on these earnings to be a lot more optimistic. Archer right there, 18% as that continues to go green. We got a Microsoft headline as well from the information. There you go. That's that Microsoft candle. Microsoft to unveil their next-gen AI chip in September, according to the information. This was the headline that came out 2 months ago when Microsoft went from 390 to 472, basically within 24 hours, and then it ended up collapsing again after some of the macro stuff. Microsoft plans to release its next-generation MAIA 300 chip in September. Microsoft to significantly raise AI chip production. Well, this was expected. I mean, the fact that the stock has made a move up to 500 without needing the chip news, I think is actually super bullish because there's a lot of other layers and elements to Microsoft that the street has got excited about. Wow, Microsoft in talks with TSMC to make the chips. By the way, TSMC reported their numbers for July, and they once again continue to be spectacular. 45% year-over-year growth again. Up 5% month over month. It's well above the 37% growth range that it guided to in Q2 earnings. So TSMC continuing to make some massive momentum. So yeah, this is not necessarily new news. This is a headline that's been out for a while. But if the information is reporting that it's much more likely to become real, aka they're actually going to start selling chips and building their own TPUs, building their own Trainium, like that side of a business that's on pace to generate $25 to $50 billion for Google and Amazon yearly. I mean, for Microsoft to become a chip play outside of just a cloud and software play, I don't think would be bearish. 504 right there on Mr. Microsoft. And it's a broader trend of the hyperscalers once again capturing the world's attention again. I mean, these stocks were basically dead for 7 months until Q2 earnings. And then the street remembered that, these are some of the greatest companies on the planet. It's hard to fade them. SpaceX right there, that's up about 1.2%. We'll talk about some of the updates on SpaceX over the weekend that Elon tweeted about that I think is getting people a bit more excited, but that's also helping Rocket Lab and ASTS as that continues to go green. Is this negative for NVIDIA? I mean, theoretically, you can interpret it as negative because that means NVIDIA will be selling less chips. Again, in an abstract world, if Microsoft, Amazon, and Google are selling, they're taking some of NVIDIA's margin. But given how much demand there is for AI, NVIDIA continues to hit their numbers. And the question is, are these Microsoft chips ASICs or are they general purpose? They're more likely ASICs, just like the TPUs and Trainiums. They're not general purpose to be used for all types of different AI activities, which is, what Vera Rubin, Feynman, H100s have been historically, Blackwell. So I would say it's expanding the pie versus necessarily taking away anything meaningful from NVIDIA. Microsoft right there, 503. Marvell should be up as they're probably going to be helping with this. Yep, Marvell, that's up 4%. I mean, every time a big player enters into the chip race, you're going to have the suppliers of the stack. Let's see if Qualcomm's up. Potentially play a role in the supply chain for that. Qualcomm's flat. The memory names should be up right now, though. I mean, the memory names should be green if Microsoft, because Microsoft's going to need memory on those chips, right? So you would imagine a lot of different sides of the stack are just going to have even more demand if Microsoft comes in. Salesforce flat in the pre-market, Boeing flat, SoFi is down about 1%, Elf is down 1%, then Oracle, that's up 0.4% as well. Okay, so let's talk about Meta, given we're talking about the hyperscalers. They came out this morning, and last week they introduced Meta Muse Spark 1.2. Today they are officially releasing it as an open source, open weights model.
Muse Glimmer will be made open. It's a $30 billion parameter dense model. It says it will be able to run on a consumer laptop, so you'll be able just to get this open weight model effectively for free. Put it on your laptop and go. Zuckerberg also praising open source AI, calling it an important force for empowering people and preventing centralization. So there's a couple of things to unpack here.
Yes.
One, Mark was very early actually on the whole idea of open source, open weight models with Llama from the beginning.
Right.
And then seemed to pull back when everybody seemed to be moving toward these closed source models, and is now, I think, leaning in, full on to the open weight situation, which is just an interesting sort of watching the pulling and pushing of what's happening in the industry.
I think what's key here is that this can run on a consumer laptop, on an ordinary consumer GPU, as opposed to a lot of the other open source models which have been released, like a Kimi K3 or
which are massive.
Massive. They're like the latest Alibaba's 2.4 trillion parameters, and this is 30 billion. But for a consumer, that's what you need. This drives the cost lower for the consumer, right? And so that's sort of
that's a huge benefit.
Huge step.
The second.
I mean, look, Zucks is leaning in to where a lot of Wall Street has started to put their attentions on, which is what happens to the models if they become as effective and efficient as the closed source models, the Frontier Labs, Anthropic, and OpenAI, but also cost less. And, for Zucks, I don't think he needs to make money on the models because his business is not selling tokens. But if he gets a business using their models, he can sell a lot of AI B2B services on top of those models, right? Which is, I think, the entire game plan for them. Same thing with every other software company. They don't need to sell tokens. They just need to use the commodity that are tokens to be able to build and sell applications and services on top of those tokens, which is, what I think Zucks is thinking about when it comes to building out a true B2B business and potentially, selling the compute from that B2B business as well. So look, if this ends up working for Zuckerberg in a meaningful way, then the question is, how good is this model in comparison to the other Frontier Labs, and how much actual change can Zucks get in the enterprise from people switching from OpenAI, Anthropic, Kimi K3, others into Meta Muse Spark? And time will tell to see what ends up happening. Here's what Alexander Wang said. He said, just like larger models, Muse Glimmer can operate as a fully capable agent via planning tool calls, checking its own results, and failure recovery. Muse Glimmer was developed with its own architecture and recipe optimized for its size and agentic performance requirements. To achieve maximum memory efficiency, we quantize model weights to 4-bit, getting the language model under 20 GB with room for KV cache, perception encoder, and drafter alongside it. A D-flash drafter responses blocks of tokens the main model verifies in parallel, so it stays responsive. And he goes on to further say why this is an effective model. Zucks also tweeted, he's starting to tweet a lot more, and basically put out his vision for what he thinks AI will do for people. Marvell's up right now based on speculation that they're going to be helping with Microsoft in building their chips. And it was called The Future is for Everyone, the Path to a Positive AI Future. And he says, everyone will have an exceptionally capable personal agent that understands you, your goals, everything you care about. You'll be able to interact with your agent through any device. We'll offer free versions that will be accessible to billions of people. Companies' sizes may shrink just as they did in the transition from industrial giants to tech companies. I expect we will start seeing a small number of people with personal superintelligence agents able to run companies at significant scale. Any policy that slows American releases even by a month could add significant risk to American leadership while letting foreign models race ahead. I propose that companies developing frontier AI should commit significant technical resources towards helping the government harden critical infrastructure. He doesn't sound like a guy who's going to be selling his vision on AI away anytime soon and stopping the CapEx. He sounds like a guy that's going after Meta superintelligence. So for all the semi stocks, I mean, Meta is going to keep spending. For Meta shareholders, we have to see eventually if people, actually choose to buy the stock in the face of all this CapEx, but it doesn't look like he's slowing down. And if he actually succeeds with Meta superintelligence and it becomes the de facto agent that people start using, and there's 4 billion people using his products already, obviously it's going to need a lot of compute, but it also would be very valuable for Meta from a business perspective. And that's why that stock is green right there. Apple is down because of some reports. Well, I don't think this is the reason, but this could be the reason. Apple has started to procure a ton of memory from China's CXMT. Now, they're not doing this for devices that are sold in the United States, from my understanding. This is all for domestic demand because that would be illegal and the government has not allowed them to buy memory from China. But for MacBooks and iPhones in China that they're selling locally, they have started to test memory chips from China's CXMT. I think Apple will start lobbying the US government to allow them to buy a ton of memory from CXMT and put it into their US devices. I don't know if Trump or Lutnick are going to give them the full approval to do that. But that's another broader concern with the memory trade. Once again, if CXMT starts flooding the market with more supply, which is not really happening because CXMT themselves is, so supply constrained because of all the demand that they have in China. So again, I don't think that narrative is the best, but nonetheless, that narrative is out there. And then you have Apple potentially procuring memory from another player that's not Micron, SanDisk, et cetera. And, the market starts to get a little bit more upset at that. But I don't think that's necessarily going to take place in the American devices that they have as well. Also, their glass model, this came out this morning, I believe is being delayed for Apple. And yeah, JP Morgan said there will be an apparent cancellation of the 20th anniversary all-glass iPhone, which would be a big setback to raise iPhone's ASP and margin in the medium term. Our supply chain checks indicate that Apple has canceled the 20th anniversary all-glass iPhone model due to poor production yield. We estimate that the phone, supposedly to be launched in September 2027, now would have blended retail ASP of $2,000. More importantly, we believe the plan was to extend the all-glass features to future iPhone Pro and Pro Max models, further raising their ASP and their margins. I still think the foldable phone is going to come out by the end of this year, from my understanding, if not early next year. If it's not the end of this year, then it's going to be like a very basic upgrade for iPhone 17, iPhone 17s. But the foldable phone is still something that the market cares about, and so we're going to see if people get it. Yeah, I think a glass phone, foldable phone. I think any hardware updates to the iPhone are only relevant after 3 or 4 years. Every year, the hardware updates become irrelevant. What really matters is the AI component of the phone actually being something that you could use on a day-to-day basis and interact with the new AI-driven world, aka an agentic Siri. And I don't think we have that yet. And until we do, I'm not sure how much momentum Apple's going to get from that. But nonetheless, their sales growth has been accelerating for the first time in 5 years, and that's why the stock is still up a lot year to date, even though it's down from that 340 level. Accelerate right here, still moving the pre-market up 33%. We are going to see if this just busts through and continues to move higher when the market opens, or if people take some profits. And I'm sure people will probably take some profits, but once you have effective phase 2 trials, you potentially create a new floor to the stock, as it's now up 30%. Palantir, that's down a little bit. I think Palantir might give a little bit back. It was up 40% last week. This could also just be pre-market selling across the entire board, but if Palantir gives a little bit of some of the returns back after having a 40% week, it is what it is. It can't be too crazy after having that much momentum. Now, granted, does Palantir look like she's ready for a run to 200? I think so. The technicals look amazing. The consolidated base looks amazing. The narrative around AI momentum looks amazing. Do I think it can make a run to 200 by the end of the year if we actually get oil to come down, this war ends, and the macro really clears up? Yeah, I think it's actually I think this time its attempt of 200 would be much more sophisticated than last year's attempt. But I think a lot of it's going to be more based on the macro. I'm just happy it's not, stuck in the 120s anymore, because it probably didn't deserve to be there. MicroStrategy, that's down 0.5%. Akamai, that's down 1.4%. DRAM, that is down 2% as well. Okay, some other headlines before we get into macro. We have a politician that just disclosed their finances. Michael Ruley, U.S. representative in Ohio, Republican. He bought Google, bought Meta, bought Micron. This was in the last 45 days. He sold Amazon, sold Apple, sold ServiceNow. Bought Google, bought Meta, bought Micron, sold Amazon, sold Apple, sold ServiceNow. Okay, there you go. Well, that's what you have from some of our representatives right here. The average amounts were like 30 to 45,000 on all of these purchases. Some of them were like 5,000. Oh, we got another one. Tony Weed, W-E-I-D, not the other one. Who is this guy? Congress. He's a Wisconsin dude. He's buying in bigger chunks. These average buys are like 50 to 200,000. He bought Adobe, Salesforce, Trade Desk, ServiceNow. Oh, that Trade Desk buy did not work out. But this was 45 days ago. He bought Adobe, Salesforce, Trade Desk, ServiceNow. He sold AMD. He sold 250 grand of AMD. He bought 50 grand of ServiceNow, 50 grand of Trade Desk, 50 grand of Salesforce, 250 grand of Adobe. Talk about someone who's trying to lever up in this software trade, bro. I mean, it literally looks like his portfolio is getting rid of semis, going long software. TTD is just, I don't know what's going on with this name, but every quarter for the past year, they've fallen 20% on earnings. And last week, they fell 20% again. Someone else who's buying, even though he's not a politician, one could argue, though, that he's a lot more powerful than every politician combined. Berkshire Hathaway. Buffett is buying again, even though Buffett might not be controlling the day-to-day activities. You've got Berkshire buying. This is the first quarter in a year that they've been net buyers versus sellers. They bought $25 billion of stock. They only sold $3.7 billion. Their earnings were up 15% year over year. They bought an entire company, Taylor Morrison Home, for $6.8 billion. I think they're betting on rates coming down and for the housing builders to, really get a re-rating. Same thing with Zillow. They invested $10 billion in Google at $350 in Q2, as per that equity dilution raise from Google. Google's now a top 5 holding, along with American Express, Coca-Cola, Apple, and I'm forgetting the last one. I think it might be, Bank of America. Bank of America, Google, Apple, American Express, and then Coca-Cola are the top 5 holdings. Google is officially now a top 5 holding for Berkshire. And they bought back $4.5 billion of their own stock. So it is very encouraging to see Berkshire start to spend a bit. They haven't been spending for a while. They still have over $360 billion in cash, but a year ago it was close to 6 months ago it was close to $400 billion. And so, they are ready to spend, which is good. The question is going to be, are there going to be any big, Disney buys, PayPal buys, getting into Microsoft? Are they going to be doing anything massive with that capital? Because as of right now, it's been relatively small purchases here and there. Berkshire now is up 5% year to date as well. Any thoughts on what's going to happen to Rocket Lab today? Honestly, I have no idea. Rocket Lab has made a bit of a run because of SpaceX, which, by the way, speaking of space, SpaceX retail investors were net sellers on Friday. Retail investors sold a net 4.5 million of SpaceX shares on Friday, their first day of net selling since the company's June IPO. So I think what happened on Friday, now 4.5 million is not a lot of money when you look at the aggregate retail demand, but I think there was so much momentum on Friday with the 10% move, which is why Rocket Lab made a move, ASTS made a move, and hopefully that continues after hours. Rocket Lab last earnings announced like 5 different deals, like Raytheon, Anduril. They just, kept putting out more and more deals as soon as the earnings came out. And that I think really lifted the positive sentiment on the earnings and started to show people that, this company is very serious about dominating. So hopefully they do something like that today after hours, along with ASTS. But I think retail took some profits on Friday because, people really got scared. SpaceX was going to go below 100, had a 10% day after a 5% day the day before, even after the unlock came out. And so I think the fact that retail ended up becoming a net seller for their first time since the company's IPO means some people finally took some profits or they broke even on the DCA that they've been having all year. Now, the question is, can SpaceX hold this momentum? And I think Elon said some stuff over the weekend that was really interesting in regards to what's happening with AI and particularly what's happening with Starlink. So semi-analysis, part of the reason I think SpaceX also pumped on Friday is because someone probably knew of a semi-analysis report that was coming out over the weekend. And this came out like Friday after hours. Semi-analysis is projecting that, they're projecting that Elon's SpaceX is going to do 300 billion in ARR by 2027 alone because of the level of compute that they are going to be able to generate. Elon commented that this was interesting when he saw this tweet over the weekend. But if they actually do 300 billion in ARR with 8 gigawatts in 2027, effectively they say that the range is 300 to 500 billion in 2027 that they can get to. And Microsoft's going to be the largest buyer, which means they're going to have a hyperscaler that can guarantee the money for SpaceX. And if they can do it at a rate that's above the current rates, which right now they're doing at like 2x the levels with Anthropic and Google, SpaceX is going to be bringing in a lot of money. And if we judge Nebius and CoreWeave off ARR versus just net income and profitability, SpaceX obviously will be profitable by then. But if we're going to judge them on ARR, if the company's doing 500 billion in ARR and the stock's worth 1.5 trillion, people are going to buy it, right? It's going to be trading at 3 times ARR. It's not going to be that hard of a buy for a lot of people to be convinced by that. But the question is, are they actually going to do that? And it's a very optimistic approach. And the thing about SemiAnalysis is they were going crazy over Meta in July, saying Meta is going to be the next big neocloud. And then Zucks gets on the call and he kind of downplays the whole neocloud thing. And he's like, look, we're focused on using our compute to build out our infrastructure and build Meta superintelligence. And if there's some opportunities to sell compute, we will. But it was not the type of vision that SemiAnalysis painted in July of Meta becoming like, the new big entry into the neocloud space. So the question is, are they being super optimistic, or are their projections like, not meaningful enough to actually move the needle? And then Elon posted this. This is a forecast by Cloudflare. Humans will be a rounding error on the internet due to agents. The fact that humans are no longer the main source on the internet for news in May, according to Cloudflare, bot traffic surpassed human traffic for the first time. However, the latest forecast is even more ambitious. In 5 years, machine traffic, aka agents, may be 1,000 times more than from real users. And Elon's argument is that AI agentic internet traffic is going to exceed all of human usage, and Starlink is going to be the core beneficiary of all of this agentic traffic. The only system that can support the insanely fast bandwidth goal needed by AI is Starlink. It's possible that Starlink may end up doing 90% of internet traffic, even if competitors 10x their bandwidth. Now, this is Elon. He says things. He also said SpaceX will do $1 trillion of revenue in 2030, 2029. But if he's even kind of right on this thesis, and SemiAnalysis is kind of right on their ARR thesis, and Elon is correct that Starlink is going to continue to grow, and Starlink is one of the most profitable businesses in the world, is there a world where they get close to $1 trillion by 2030? I think it's possible. You just have to have a lot of things to go right. And then that begs the question, how much of a risk do you want to take on the stock based on all that execution coming to fruition? But I think that's why the stock is up in the pre-market. Rock Lab right there, 84.60. Yes, hopefully we get a profitable quarter by Rock Lab. I don't think they're expected to be profitable. I think they're about 5 cents away from GAAP profitability. If they end up showing some net income today, I think the street will love it, just because they're becoming a big boy company and they're achieving net income profitability. But if they don't, and they just give us some Neutron updates, I think the street would also be happy about that. Accelera still up 30% right here in the pre-market right now. FNG, thank you for the super chat. Your basis points intro should be the new Rolly intro. For those that saw basis points over the weekend, you're welcome. Okay, all I have to say is you're welcome. Those first 2 minutes, I know you haven't listened to anything that good in a while, and so all I have to say is you're welcome. If you haven't seen the new basis points, you can listen to the first 4 minutes and then come back and thank me for what I did to your ears in that performance. It's pretty good. That's all I'm going to say. Steve also said it wasn't that bad. So Steve said it. Dude, I've been listening to that song all week. I think like the amount of Freddie Mercury videos I've been watching over the weekend, like this guy is an icon, man. Like just an unbelievable human being. And like, and I'm like really into this whole Bohemian Rhapsody. I still haven't watched the movie yet. I want to watch the movie this week, but like, man, now I get why someone said it's the greatest song of all time. I'm like, I probably wouldn't put it greatest all time, but absolutely it's top 10. I agree. It's absolutely top 10. After listening to it 20 times, I'm like, oh my God, this is a top 10 song of all time. This really is. So yeah, I am becoming a Queen fan. Absolutely becoming a Queen fan. I didn't even know they made the song We Will Rock You. I was like, oh, I've heard that song before. Like this band is a legend, dude. Legendary band. So I'm a fan now. Google right there. That's up 0.34%. Coherence up 1%. AAOI is up 3%. Lumentum's up 3%. You're seeing a decent chunk of momentum in some of these optics names. AMD still down 1%. They had a good earnings, but once again, the valuation, I think, got ahead of it, which is why that stock took a little bit of a hit. Nonetheless, SpaceX recovered. So maybe, maybe Google or maybe AMD recovers as well. By the way, this is what Goldman said on optics and memory. They said, what's up with memory versus optical spread? After similar drawdowns in July, both optics and memories were down 30%. Optics have now outperformed memory by 20% to start August. I am really curious if this trend continues to stay, if the optics actually continue, your Lumentums, Coherence start to outperform your Microns and SanDisks. Yes, there's been some good headlines over the weekend for why optics will be in more demand, but if the market really shifts like that, it's just going to be bottleneck to bottleneck, right? And the new bottleneck of optics might be, which is not denying the old bottleneck of memory, but it just might be where more capital gets excited to take a role in. and potentially position itself there. The question is, are they going to be shorting memory to go long on this trade? And I don't think that's necessarily the case, but we're going to have to see how the market interprets that. By the way, this is what Trump said over the weekend. He is low-keying it, that is an exact quote, with Iran, and he is prepared to allow economic pressure to mount as opposed to ordering a new military offensive. On Saturday, Iran issued a new list of demands to allow shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. We are only semi-negotiating with them, Trump said. U.S. officials say President Trump is looking to de-escalate for now, and that is why I think you have oil prices that are up. This is not the worst news, but it's not like the super bullish momentum we saw last Wednesday, where it was, Trump basically saying the war is over. We're not there yet. Bessent said we could get a ceasefire over the weekend. We did not get a ceasefire over the weekend. So I think the new list of demands from Tehran came, and it's one of those things where Trump's not even like complaining about the new list of demands. There was also a report over the weekend that said Trump is willing to walk away from his ambitions of a complete nuclear withdrawal as long as Iran fully agrees to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily true. I doubt Trump would ever admit that because obviously he wants to, be the guy who gets Iran to give up all their nukes. But it's getting to the point where the midterms are coming up and his tenure is not really calming down enough. I mean, it's almost 4.7 again in the pre-market, 4.68. So at some point, one side's going to have to capitulate. And if it's not the Iranians, it might be the United States. They're just going to have to frame the victory in a different way. Otherwise, we're just going to have higher oil prices, higher bond yields, and I don't think stocks are necessarily going to love that, especially because we're at all-time highs, right? If we were not at all-time highs, it's a different question, but now the S&P is very vulnerable to any bad piece of news. I mean, the S&P goes down 2-3% from here. That's typical. That's what happens at all-time highs. Like you take 2-3% drawdowns, 4-5% drawdowns. I don't think we need to go down 10%. You consolidate, and then you make the next leg up and create a bigger base. But the question is the macro going to create the circumstances to make that happen? And we are going to see S&P 500 right there, basically flat in the pre-market. Okay, we've got 40 seconds. Thank you all for being here. We are starting off the week. We've got a ton of earnings to look at. NVIDIA in a couple weeks. Most of the earnings are done. So I think this week the market is going to be more concerned about some of this macro news, but hopefully a lot of these other companies can deliver strong earnings. We can keep this going. 2026 is moving fast. In a couple weeks, we will officially be into September in the fall. And hopefully we can just have a good August as we end out this month like we had a good week to begin August. All right, here we go. Monday, August 10th. Thank everybody for being here. The stock market is now open. All right, wake your ass up. Let's get into it. The S&P 500 opens flat on the day. Meta opens above 600. That continues to be green, 600.78. Obviously, Meta had a little bit of a tough time last week and the week before when they fell on earnings to 520, but they had a nice little recovery. SpaceX, are we green on the day? SpaceX opens green, 134.50, about 50 cents away from the IPO price. Marvell up 5% on the idea that Microsoft will be using them to help build their MAIA chips. Microsoft 507, baby. Microsoft finally getting above that $500 level definitively. Let's see if we can hold above 500. Every dollar above for Microsoft is another chance of not going below that $500 level and adds another $7 billion in market cap. 3.77 trillion right there for Microsoft. Micron opens down 2%. Qualcomm opens down 0.5%. NVIDIA basically flat. Amazon opens green. Rocket Lab 85.79. Rocket Lab opens up. Rocket Lab now 86. That one immediately moving higher. AAOI 147. Again, the optics trade. I think a lot of flows are going to be coming into optics. Rocket Lab exploding at the open right there, almost 87. And I think you're going to start to see a lot more money come into optics, even if it's just there for a trade. Google opens green. Coherent opens red. That's weird. Lumentum also lost everything. Wow, 937 to 902. That's crazy. Palantir 173. Okay, nice to see that pre-market sell off to 168. Might have just been low volume. 173 on Palantir. Let's see if 175. Wow, we hit 174.97. We were very close to 175. S&P turns green. Epsilera up 27%. That's holding that earnings move. Akamai, that's up 1%. CrowdStrike, that's up 2%. You've got Uber, which is getting a lot more attention. Uber 76.73. Nancy Pelosi, by the way, has $85 calls on Uber. I mean, Pelosi's, pretty much nailed every trade over the past year. So maybe Uber is the next trade. Obviously, Bill Ackman is another big investor in Uber. Netflix, that's flat. Zeta, that's flat. ASTS, that's up 1%. COPEX, so copper and the demand for copper, if you're obviously seeing what's happening with the optics trade and what's happening with NVIDIA's necessity for copper in their chips, and also the price of the actual commodity itself, copper's going up. And so the copper miners might actually be a potential trade going into the end of the year if copper continues this momentum. UNH, that's up 1.3%. Serve Robotics, that's up 2%. Adobe, that is flat. AAOI, 146. Palantir, she wants 175. She wants 175. 3 cents away. I think we'll get it. There it is, folks. 175. Year to date, Palantir is now only down 3%. It is continuing some of that momentum from last week. And it's very exciting to see that as it continues on. I mean, the stock was effectively dead for 7 months. And now you are starting to see it break out as the market tries to figure out how to allocate capital effectively. Also, you're seeing some of the semi names take a hit, which means some of that money is rotating back into software. And the question becomes which software name to buy. And I think Palantir is the one that pops up for a lot of these fund managers. ServiceNow, that's flat, down about 1%. Western Digital, that's down about 1%. AEHR, that should also be up. That's in your photonics trade, the bucket of photonics, which that continues to go green. Rocket Lab is 85.32, up 3%, just below 86.80, almost touched 87. And then Microsoft Hero 505. CoreWeave lost the pump. I think CoreWeave and Nebius are going to have really sophisticated earnings this week. Not just good earnings, but earnings that make the Michael Burrys of the world really question why they're short. Because Burry is questioning his Palantir short right now. Like, there's no way he's looking at this price action and those numbers and not thinking more deeply about his short. And, I would imagine he would close his short over time, as I don't think the stock's going to 50. For Nebius, all the momentum is on the short side as Nebius goes down 2% right here, because obviously these names have taken a pretty big hit. The easiest way to combat this is earnings. I mean, it's just that simple. You have to have flawless execution to get the shorts to leave. And that's usually the way that it plays out. There were some pictures going around over the weekend that like Goldman Sachs is a 10% position in Nebius. That's not going to matter. That no one cares about. I mean, Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, Blackstone, Jane Street, they all take positions in these companies all the time. So, it's not like an opinionated long short fund that decided to bet on Nebius. It's a company that sells calls and puts and needs to have shares to collateralize their market making activity. So from that perspective, none of that stuff is going to change the narrative. What's going to change it is Nebius just executing massively on their earnings. And ultimately this week, we're going to have to see how the street thinks of that. Archer right there up 12% as that continues to go green. Seeing a couple red candles come in. S&P 500 just flipped red right there. A few of these names that were super green, including AAOI, 150 to essentially 140. Rocket Lab just lost pretty much all of the hype that it had as soon as the market opened within those 5 minutes. Obviously, these algos are going back and forth in very quick order. IREN also goes red, 4%. As that continues to go down. Arnie says, how can we short Burry? Look, this Palantir short has not worked out, and the NVIDIA short has not worked out. I think the only short Burry got right this year was Micron. I don't even know if he closed it, but he shorted it at about 1,000. And, he's up on it, but it's not like some 50, 60% decline. I think he wants Nebius to be that short. I don't think he's shorted at 211 to close it at 180. So obviously he's down on the QQQ shorts and the SOX puts. But, good earnings is what kind of changes the narrative many times with these shorts. CoreWeave right there, $90. Still holding 90, even though it's red today. Still holding 90, which is good to see, given that stock was below 60 a couple weeks ago. Reddit 161. Reddit's been holding up. Airbnb has had a massive run. Some of these consumer discretionary names like Airbnb, Uber, et cetera, they've started to break out a little bit, and maybe they're taking some of the money from the semis. Robinhood kind of still flat at 93, but Bloom also down 2%, Circle down 0.5%. It is good to see some of those staples get the momentum. Shopify was at $97 2 months ago, $150. I mean, just an incredible, exceptional company that has been re-rated. SoFi at $18.33, and then Elf at $94. Elf also had a great earnings. That stock's down 4%, but Elf had a massive earnings last week and deserve to get the pump. SanDisk goes green. Maybe Micron follows. Micron's still red, but it looks like it wants to go green. 868 on Micron. Take two. Got the Grand Theft Auto Catalyst. That's up 2.7%. That Catalyst will have to be approved soon as we see the game come out in November. Rubrik, is that green? Rubrik is also green. Rubrik's been a big winner, dude. This thing got to like $50. A lot of these software names, yeah, 63 back in July. A lot of these software names are finding their bid as the market starts to recognize. Like Anthropic's not the scary boogeyman anymore. Like no one's like scared of them. They have a massive valuation. They have growth that's probably unsustainable. They're selling tokens that, yeah, they'll make a profit on, but with more and more models, especially from bigger companies like Meta coming out, it really weakens the moat of the tokens themselves. And they're going to be levering up on debt and equity when they go public to buy compute for the foreseeable future. So when you talk about cash flows, when you talk about sustained profitability, when you talk about having a realistic moat, I mean, I don't think Anthropic's taken away anything from the software companies. Some of the software companies will be replaced 100%, but the more important ones I think will survive. And I think those are the ones that are getting the bid right there. Microsoft 504, as that continues to go green. It was SaaS summer all along. It was indeed SaaS summer all along. Now we still have a month of summer, a month and a half. So we got to see if we can keep SaaS summer alive, but from the lows. But it's, you know, it's not just SaaS. I think the Leopold liquidation event allowed everything to get re-rated. Some stuff positively, some stuff negatively, but you had a cascading liquidation event across the entire market that obviously caused a pump on everything. And it kind of switched the dynamics of long, semi, short software, you know, because that entire trade unwound, which is a good thing for the software names and not the best thing for the semi names, but at least the semi names are not down as much as they were before. SpaceX potentially going red right there, 134, 133.90 now. Trying to hold on to the 130s. Lumentum officially goes red. That's weird. You would think Lumentum would be up today, especially because AAOI had really good earnings last week, which if the optics trade is the new trade, the bucket of photonic stocks should be up. I'm actually confused. I actually have no idea why Lumentum's getting hit right here, but it is indeed getting hit. Qualcomm, that's down 1%. Marvell just lost the whole pump. Okay, so very similar semiconductor action that we've seen over the past couple of weeks. They get something at the open, and then it just gets sold off. We'll see if it recovers any of it, but Marvell losing the entire 5% right here. As that goes red. Lululemon launches a viral 80-liter tote bag. This is one of Burry's biggest longs, by the way. Lululemon released its 3-foot wide, they're calling it a big ass bag, 80 liters tote in 2 colors. Why are they doing this? Lululemon's oversized tote has generated widespread online attention through its size and its product name. Okay. Maybe that's the next big thing for Lulu. Nebius right there. That's down 2. Palantir sticking in the 170s. Yeah, optics taking a little bit of a dump here. Interesting. AAOI lost everything. Wow. Is there a headline on optics? It feels a little algo driven right there, but that's kind of crazy for it to go from 15% to 0. 10-year is at least down 4.67. A bit from the pre-market. Uber still up. Oil, did we go up? Are we at 80 on oil? Let me check. That could be part of the issue right here. We were very close to 80 pre-market. Oil right now is... yeah, just crossed 80. There it goes. Up 2.3%, officially 80. All right, so something around this Iran stuff is definitely upsetting the market. Micron down 2% as well. Oil's at resistance, though. Maybe. I mean, definitely last week, it didn't really make a move above 80. But 2 weeks before that, it was, pushing 90, which was the issue. Elf right there, down 5%. Coherent was up 4 to down 10. Yeah, Oh man, they absolutely rugged the Photonics names pre-market. Goodness, dude. Only took them 10 minutes to make the run, but goodness, that's an ugly downside move. Nvidia, that's down about a third of a percent. At least Nvidia's above 220. Took it a month and a half to get back into the 220. Zeta just flips green, almost 27. Rigetti's down. Your quantum names are down. Corning, which is in the Photonics play, that's down as well. As that continues to go green. Or red, I should say. Let's see if I can get an update on oil. Satellite imagery shows oil leak in Strait of Hormuz after IRGC hit commercial vessel over the weekend. Oh boy. Iran struck an Abu Dhabi National Oil Company tanker in the Strait. Its owner reported no injuries and said a fire was extinguished. Satellite imagery now showing a massive oil leak in the Strait of Hormuz. How bad is the leak, I guess, is also the question. How much oil are we losing right there? Zeta 27, Serve up 1, Adobe flat, UNH up 1. Palantir back above 175. Maybe she's going for 176. Pretty damn close right there. Wow, Accelera also moving as well. Congrats if you're in this. 37% on the day. This is the beauty of biotechs. It could either go down 40% a day or up 40% a day. Like, it's really the binary bet, and that then it comes down to due diligence and conviction over the company's execution. And if they really execute, then it obviously can pay off very nicely. Palantir up 2.4. There you go, 176. 170. Interesting. So you got Palantir at 176.40, looking like it wants to get to 180. You got a couple of the other software names moving. Pretty much all the semis have gone red. Is that what we're seeing? Yeah, Marvell's up 18 cents. Dell's up $1. ASML was up a lot more, took a red candle, and SMCI is up 4%. Outside of that, NVIDIA going down further, AMD down 1.4, TSM's down. Broadcom should be up a little bit. Theoretically, they could help with those Microsoft chips, but that's not confirmed. I would expect Broadcom, though, is like the biggest custom ASICs solutions provider, to potentially be working with Microsoft right there. S&P goes flat. Wow, Palantir. I mean, she's coming back, folks. 2025 vibes. I mean, when she runs, she runs. When she runs, she runs. Now, remember, we went through a 50% drawdown. We went from 207 to 107. Like, literally took a 50% haircut. So it's not that crazy that the street's excited to buy this again. The earnings are better. The narrative around AI is more on their side. The analysts are on their side with the upgrades. And, I mean, if CARP is right, they're going to grow 130% next year. The company's going to be doing close to $20 billion in revenue. Like, it's not as expensive as it has seen in prior cycles. And I think that's why the street could be piling in right there. Nebbia's getting a little bit of a move, 189. That's getting some love. CrowdStrike also going up. The cybersecurity names have been the best names in software this year from a divergence perspective from the traditional software narrative, especially with the advance of Mythos. Palo Alto all-time highs, CrowdStrike all-time highs. So it seems like your Palantirs of the world based on earnings, and then your CrowdStrikes and Palo Altos based on cybersecurity headlines are catching that bid. Celsius, the reason it was up on Friday was because the Rockstar energy drink founder bought 5% of the company, gave it like a 10% pump. Now it's up about 4% or down 4%. So I'm not sure how sustainable that headline is to get the market excited about Celsius again. But the earnings weren't good, obviously, and they might have an activist investor coming in as well. Gold's down 0.5%. The yen is up a little bit. So you got some of that yen intervention that the street was concerned about last week continuing to be something that still creates some concerns in general. And we're going to have to see if Basent continues to intervene right there. They obviously intervened last week, which is what kind of stabilized the yen carry trade. By the way, take a look at this chart. Margin trading in Korea has definitively peaked, at least for now. If you take a look at this, the blue chart is the amount of margin that was being used, and it's coming down dramatically. And the reason for that is obviously because of massive liquidations, and if the stocks aren't going up, then people stop using as much margin right there. So this could also be part of the reason why the memory stocks have been taking a little bit of a. I mean, if the trade was really rooted in momentum and the leverage that builds the momentum is not as levered up as anymore in the United States and in Korea, then yeah, the trade's going to relax a little bit. And I think that's what we're seeing. Micron right there trying to flip green, 872 right now. Archer continues to make a move. They had an announcement today with Boeing, Boeing was going to take an equity stake in the company. That's why that stock's up 18. And they acquired 3 other companies. They just brought $200 million of revenue into the business via acquisition, 6.63, up 18.4%. Koreans had to sacrifice themselves. Yeah, I mean, look, and it wasn't even the Koreans sacrificing themselves in and of itself. It was the market forcing their hands, which, Kospi was at 9,000 at one point, dude. It had doubled. Imagine the S&P going like 14,000 from here in 6 months. Like it would be unheard of. That's the amount of excitement that was there. And ultimately, it took a bit of a beating. I think there's a world when Kospi gets back to 9,000, but the only reason it got there was because of Samsung and SK Hynix. That's the scariest part of it. It's like if those two companies have any hiccups, there's nothing left in South Korea to invest in or to be excited about. So those two just need to keep going. But if they need the leverage to keep going and the leverage is not there anymore because they're not going, it's kind of the cycle in which it takes a break. Nebius back over 190. CoreWeave trying to flip green as well. Let's see if the market's bringing back some of this momentum to these names. Fear and greed. Let's take a look at that. Last week we were at greed. We're still at greed. We're actually higher than we were last week. We're at 64. I mean, look, it definitely feels a bit greedy. I'm not going to lie. It absolutely feels a bit, given the level of abysmal price action we saw at the last week of July that led to the recovery. Yeah, now it feels a bit greedy. The question is, does that mean S&P has to go down 5%, 10%? Can it stay flat? Can we have things consolidate? Many of these names that people are greedy about, they were dead all year. So quite frankly, they deserve to have some greed. But I don't know if the dynamics are blow off top like we had back in June. Right? That was just unbelievable levels of greed with leverage that obviously resulted in what we saw at the end of July. So I don't think we're there. But yeah, it definitely feels a bit more greedy, but that's just because a lot of these names are finally breaking out. And, if they fall 10% from here, they'll still be up a lot more from where they were earlier in the year. Corning, that stock trying to move as well. Is oil still spiking? I think it is. Yep. Oil now 80.50. Let's see if it actually breaks $81. It's up 3% here on the day. Brent crude's almost at 86. Why did Oklo get hammered? Oklo did not have the best earnings last week, although they did get a new deal. But SMR also didn't have the best earnings, so I think that entire nuclear space ended up taking a bit of a hit as well. Let's see if we have any macro data here. We did have a big earthquake in Colombia this morning, 7.4 magnitude. Not seeing any residual impacts of that yet, but I'm sure we'll see something soon. Do we have inflation data this week? I think we have CPI and PPI this week. Yeah, we do. Wait. Do we? We have home sales this week. Yes. Okay, Wednesday. All right, Wednesday will be important. It seems like we have CPI on Wednesday. And then GDP growth and then PPI on Thursday. Okay, so we have a decent chunk of inflation data today or this week that the market's going to have to interpret. SpaceX candles, are we green? SpaceX goes red. All right, so that one flips from 139 pre-market to 132. You're seeing Rocket Lab take a bit of a sell-off right there as well. NVIDIA also getting some pain, but not really losing the 220s in any meaningful way. Do you think Palantir keeps up its momentum? I think the blue skies for Palantir are very strong because of how stuck the stock has been for 7 months.
Now, does it make a run to 200 tomorrow? No, but by the end of the year, is it possible? Yeah, I think so. It just like the $200 level on Palantir is going to be such a psychological thing that you're going to need another blockbuster earnings to break through, which I think we'll get. But also, you're going to need a decent macro. I mean, you're going to need this war to be over, because for the market to give it that type of a premium, which I think is deserved, but again, for the market to believe in that after the run it's had in the past week, you're going to need some macro love. And that, I think, is more so dictated around Trump. Same thing with NVIDIA. I don't think NVIDIA really sees 250 until, you know, the war is over and like you actually have an easier environment to buy stocks in. But, you know, again, these names were just dead for the majority of the. Same thing with Shopify, right? Like, why Shopify 150? Well, it was stuck at 100, 105 for like 3 months. Had a great earnings, broke out. Could Shopify get to 175? Yeah, I think so. But there's going to need to be a lot of macro that helps it get there, because now, you know, it's not dirt cheap like it was a few months ago as well. Hood is the one that's confusing to me. I don't get why Hood's below 100. It feels like someone knows something about Hood that's bearish. Or like, I just don't get it. They just passed 300 million transactions on Robinhood Chain over the weekend. Like, those earnings did not deserve to keep this below 100. So that one's a bit more confusing to me. Yeah, we're going to cover Rock Lab and ASTS tonight. I don't know what call we'll listen to. Oh, that they've never reported on the same day, right? If I pick one, everyone's going to say I hate the other one. Granted, Rocket Lab's call tends to be like really long. So I don't know if we're going to listen to that one. Like, I think one time it was like 2.5 hours or something. It was like a very, very long call. NVIDIA right there, 222. Yeah, Matt might be streaming Rocket Lab anyway, so maybe we do ASTS. ASTS calls was boring as hell though last time, dude. Like, this is not a company that can deliver an exciting shareholder call back above 70. I feel like Rocket Lab should start doing a video call. The market would be excited about that. Why is TerraWolf dumping? I do not know. Are you still in Rocket Lab? Yes. Matt Money is the reason I bought it. What, early 2025? I bought Rocket Lab. He bought Hood. They were both at around $20 at the time. So that was kind of our trade. And, you know, then I just started buying more about it. And I bought more in the March dip at 57. That was one of my bigger buys. Having said that, when I got to 150, it also felt a bit aggressive. Like, it did not have the earnings yet to support 150. But now that it's taken a 50% drawdown, I don't think it has to get back to 150, but I don't think it needs to be stuck below 100. Like, I think if we're in a market that is more excited about their earnings and potentially profitability and Neutron, they can get there. The problem is, once again, I think Rocket Lab is stuck. I mean, look, SpaceX going red, Rocket Lab going red. Like, they don't trade 1-to-1, but they definitely trade closer to each other. And unfortunately, if SpaceX exploded on Friday, so did Rocket Lab. And so they're kind of just in that same category. Wolf, I don't know why that's down, but I think all the neoclouds are down. So that's why Wolf is taking a bit of a hit right there. What else are we seeing right here? We're going to get new home sales tomorrow. Is anyone buying the memory dip? Micron 874. Below 900. That continues to kind of be stuck behind that level. Again, Berkshire, we talked about it in the morning. They are spending a lot, spent $40 billion on stocks in the past 6 months. And they bought $5 billion of their own stock. Intel did file that $15 billion offering. That's why Intel is down 5%. VIX at 15. It's not moving too much here. Rick says, I've been buying IBM. Wow, this thing definitely bottomed at 204 after like a 63% hit. 240. Obviously, they still have some concerns around organic growth in the business, but you know, that 204 bottom kind of marked the bottom of SaaS in and of itself. Accelera still up almost 37%. Intel still down 5%. Lumentum down 4%. Do you think Micron gets a pop on its investor day? I think Sanjay is going to try to say some stuff to calm memory sentiment down, because I think he can also recognize that people are starting to get worried about the boom and bust issue. So yeah, I think they're going to be a pop. He needs to announce something the market doesn't already know. the market has hyperanalyzed these memory stocks aggressively. So the question is, can he announce some type of agreement that we haven't seen in the past, or something of that nature? And then I think the market might react. Here's an update on some of this cybersecurity stuff. It's why CrowdStrike and Palo Alto are catching a bid right here.
18 lawmakers sent a letter to House Speaker Mike Johnson this morning asking him to immediately schedule a hearing with AI leaders. They say they want answers on what caused these security incidents, whether any failures or negligence at the companies led to them, and what sort of regulation could make sure they never happen again. This coming, of course, after OpenAI, Anthropic, Meta, and others have all reported incidents in recent weeks of their models hacking other organizations. It's a story that seems to just keep on evolving. The lawmakers in the letter describe these as serious in and of themselves, but also potentially the canary in the coal mine, warning of much more serious problems if these models continue to advance without regulation. They say that institutions from hospitals to banks could be jeopardized by what they described as this sort of instability. And guys, these Democrats don't have the power on their own to compel executives to testify. Johnson and likely Republican committee chairs would have to be involved. But the letter does suggest at least some broadening interest within the party in trying to hold executives accountable. The incidents have already sparked concerns among the public. At least polls suggest that they have. So we'll see now if this leads to any traction for a new regulatory push on Capitol Hill. Guys?
Yeah, there are 120 AI-related bills currently being considered in Congress? Yes. Is anyone major one?
No major. They've always done this sort of piecemeal. It's been so hard for Congress to get anything moving, so we'll see.
Speaking of Congress getting anything moving, the Clarity Act, and by the way, that's why your cybersecurity names are running based on House Democrats campaigning for more cybersecurity. The Clarity Act was supposed to happen August 7th. We're now looking at September 15th for a vote after the August recess. So it might take some time to get clarity into motion. Bitcoin has been flat since last week. But yeah, clarity is going to take some time. Fastly getting a move. Akamai had great earnings. So did Fastly. I mean, both those companies had really good earnings. They got sold off last week because last week was a weird week to report earnings, but both incredible numbers. CDNs are only increasing. Even Elon talked about it today, the Cloudflare report that came out this morning. It doesn't look like the demand for content delivery networks is slowing down anytime soon. Uber, that's up 3. Microsoft, that's still up 2. SanDisk up 3. Ondas, your drone stock's getting a little bit more love. This thing was at $7 2 weeks ago, now $9.44. That's up 3.73%. MP Materials also, the rare earth trade. I don't think the rare earth trade is dead. It's obviously lost some steam, but it's funny. The rare earth trade and the silver trade back in January were like the two biggest trades, and obviously that shifted to memory as Micron flipped screen and space. But it's not like those trades don't have value in them, and I would think rare earths is probably a bit more exciting than silver, just given how much rare earths we need for AI in general. Coherent down 8%. That is a bit weird. Again, I'm not sure why the photonics names dumped like that, but there was a lot of hype about them over the weekend, which the opposite of the crowd tends to happen many times when there is that hype. ServiceNow down about 1%. Intel still down 4%. Duolingo making a nice comeback from the absolute lows. They had a really good earnings. I don't think they deserve to fall on those earnings, and you're seeing the street give them some love again, but this stock is still down a lot from the highs. Wow, oil keeps going up, dude. We're at almost 81. I mean, you're not really seeing the S&P react that negatively towards it, but it is still down. TSM at 14.5 billion of sales in July, as that was green. Apple will power their new Siri AI features for users in mainland China with Alibaba's Qwen models rather than Gemini to comply with Chinese regulations. So once again, you've got different models being used in different locations, which once again proves that Apple kind of doesn't need to build their own model. They just plug into different models. Fastly up almost 11. And the street kind of doesn't punish them for that. NVIDIA, once again, getting another candle down, losing 222. Oh, Cloudflare did announce $2 billion of convertible debt. This stock was down a lot more in the pre-market, so it's starting to recover. It's down like 3%. But once again, whether it's Cloudflare or Intel, you know, when you're a company of this size and you're not like a small cap raising debt, like usually it's for a good reason. You're obviously trying to grow. And so I don't think the street is going to punish them that much. Rick says he's shorting Intel. Now, Intel did get to the 80s last month. 79 was low. The thing about shorting a lot of these semi names that got hit during the Leopold liquidation is like, by the way, the dude is still pretty happy as he is officially married now. But the thing about shorting them is just like how much lower can they go if those lows were artificial, aka Nebius at 147. Was that a real source of price action for Nebius, or was that just the hedge funds squeezing the shorts, or the hedge funds continuing to pile on into the shorts, and that's what caused the pain, right? Same thing with Intel at 79. So what's the risk reward going short on some of these names that haven't really recovered that much? Like they've recovered, but not that much. And is your target the downside that we had 2 weeks ago? Because if that downside was fake, like if Micron didn't really need to go to $705 2 weeks ago, is shorting it here to get back to those levels that were artificial? Like is that the logic behind the short? Because otherwise the risk is against you, and you know the upside from the potential downside is minimal because there might not be that much downside. Like maybe there's 5 or 10%, but I don't know if there's 20 or 30%. Archer almost up 20%. Wow. Look at that. 673. Is Joby catching a little bit on this? Joby is up a little bit as well. Why is SMCI pumping? I still haven't seen the headline today for SMCI. It's like independently. We know last week or 2 weeks ago they announced that they doubled their margins, which the street liked. Do they have earnings this week? I don't see any news about SMCI reports tomorrow. Okay, so people are probably buying it going into earnings tomorrow. Okay. The more important question is, was the top real or just inflated by leverage? That's a good question as well. Having said that, we've already surpassed the top on the S&P because the S&P is at all-time highs. So the question then becomes, was that short-term top on the semis, which are really the names that topped in June? I mean, software was dead. Hyperscalers were dead. Effectively, was Micron at 1250 real? Was Nebius at 298 real? Or was that inflated by leverage? I think that's a good question. And obviously the earnings and the street's reaction to those earnings over the coming months will kind of prove or deny that. But the S&P's earnings growth, I mean, take a look at this chart right here. The S&P, once again, these earnings have been just so monumental. And it doesn't look like they're stopping. And a lot of, I mean, if it's not AI, then I don't know what's causing this types of earnings growth. 90% of S&P 500 companies have reported. Second quarter EPS is projected to surge 30% year over year, excluding the Anthropic and SpaceX markups from Alphabet and Amazon, which is above the 22% forecast from July 1st. So if you take out the earnings padding that Alphabet and Amazon did with their private stakes, you still get 31% year-over-year growth. I mean, we haven't seen 31% year-over-year growth in, what, over a decade? More than that on the S&P? It's the one thing that the bears, you're really fighting something massive, unless that entire earnings growth is fake, which I'm not saying it's not inflated by certain sectors or certain stocks, but if it's not fake, you can be short day to day, week to week, maybe month to month, but to be short in a secular way because everything is going to collapse when the earnings continue to compound, it's just tough to make that argument. Goldman Sachs maintained their 286 price target on Nebius. What was the fund that decreased it last week? I forgot. I think was it Bank of America? No, it was a different one. But it was they were upset about the Vineland data center build for Nebius and the pushback that it's getting, and they're saying that could stop their execution. But they downgraded them from like 250 to 175. Yeah, D.A. Davidson. And so I think on earnings, that's the biggest thing that management's going to have to talk about is like, hey, is the execution on building these data centers on track, or is that pushback FUD? Is that real, or is like you know, because the market's obviously interpreting it to be a bit more real than not. SanDisk up 4%. They have an investor day this week after they had earnings last week. So the street will be looking at that and caring. If you think memory is cyclical, you can't be extremely excited about the S&P 500 earnings growth. I think that's a fair point. Granted, you know, I think there's two types of cyclical. There's memory is cyclical and memory earnings are going to fall off a cliff type of cyclical, or memory earnings are cyclical and memory earnings are not going to grow as much as they've been growing right now. And I think I'm more in the latter camp, which is like the earnings growth is inflated. Definitely, you know, Micron's 50% of the earnings growth right now for the S&P. But it's not like, you know, in 2029, Micron's going to produce $10 of earnings from producing $180 of earnings, because that type of boom and bust has happened before. But instead of doing 180 of EPS for a year, they might do, you know, 125, which is still a lot of earnings growth. It's just not the massive growth. So obviously the multiples might contract, but it's not to say, you know, the stock falls off a cliff because the earnings completely are decimated. And at the same time, you would want other companies to pick up the slack. And I think that's the whole point of this AI revolution, is like, what are the other names that can step in and meaningfully show that there's real growth here outside of just memory. Microsoft 508, high of the day, and then Uber 77 as Micron is trying for 900 as SanDisk continues to get some green. Crude's still at 81. It's not slowing down, which might be a bit annoying for the rest of the day. Can't believe Microsoft is holding all these gains. Yeah, it's actually very encouraging because, again, this is historically a stock. I mean, in 2023, 2024, Microsoft really didn't even do that much compared to the other hyperscalers. And it just like, it wasn't the best Mag 7 to own out of all of them when the Mag 7 were really dominating the majority of the market's gains. So, you know, and Microsoft had that lost decade from 2000 to 2014, you know, so there's all this kind of like sentiment around Microsoft as a name that doesn't move, and it is up more than 40% in the past month. So it is moving, and it's proving that buying the dip was the right strategy, especially for a name that's as consequential as important as Microsoft. Almost a $4 trillion market cap. SMCI still up 5. Archer now up 21. Crypto is dead. It used to move 10 to 15%. Now it barely moves 1 to 2%. Yeah, you know, honestly, someone over the weekend said this, and I kind of agree. A lot of the crypto speculators went to AI and memory. You know, like I think a lot of crypto speculators just left and said, you know, even if they're trading perpetual futures contracts in a more crypto-esque way to lever up on US stocks instead of like actually trading them via like a Fidelity account, that still is a lot of momentum and buying pressure on these names. And I mean, it makes more sense if Bitcoin is barely moving than SanDisk giving you a 5% move. That's a lot of money that could be made up or down on that. SpaceX still flat, 132. Okay, let's see some of the other headlines we have here. SanDisk is still a top pick at Cantor Fitzgerald. 2,900 is their price target. Most active names in the market so far today via volume: SpaceX, Archer, Hertz, Intel, Epsilera. Epsilera 20 million shares, Intel 24 million, Hertz 29 million, Archer 39 million traded, SpaceX 43 million shares have been traded. So we're seeing those names get a lot of love and a lot more momentum right here as the semis continue to kind of take a break. The Fed probabilities for a rate cut is now, wow, 50-50. Look at that. This thing was a lot more aggressive a week ago. Remember last week, the sort of reason we pumped on Friday is because the jobs report was worse than expected. The market wanted 83,000 positive. We lost negative 23. It was, the memes were actually hilarious. It's like 23,000 people filed for unemployment. Stock market investors celebrate. And it's like, but that's actually like, if you're investing in equities, you need the Fed to cut rates. And for them to cut rates, there needs to be a pressure on the downside level for inflation. Obviously, Trump with the whole Iran situation is not helping inflation come down as it oils back over 80. So you need something to budge, and like the labor market weakening a little bit, given how strong the labor market has been. Nebius almost 195. There it goes. Is what you needed. And that's what we got on Friday. The market loved it. S&P at all-time highs. And the potential for a rate cut now goes back into place. S&P almost hitting highs of day. Been really choppy all morning. Green, red, green to red. It looks like we are trying to hold on to some more green right here. CoreWeave also getting a breakout. Above 92. If crypto dies, isn't that bad for Hood? Yeah, it wouldn't be the best. Maybe that's also why Hood's been held back. As much as it's diverged from crypto, you know, you kind of really need crypto momentum to take it further. Maybe that could be the reason. MicroStrategy down 2, Akamai up 8 as well. Okay, so Nebius making a run for it. NVIDIA also back to 222. S&P almost at 775. I mean, she's trying. Accelera still holding almost a 40% move right there. 939, touch 980 at one point. Look at AAOI. This thing went from 148 to 133, right back to 148. I mean, that's pretty incredible price tag, and that is not retail selling it up and down that much. That's got to be the Toots playing with this name a bit more aggressively. That is weird. That's a essentially 17% swing back and forth. And again, they had a good earnings last week. They beat EPS by 200%. A lot of photonics momentum. The real reason, again, the photonics names are pumping is because NVIDIA is reportedly not using as much HBM memory and trying to solve the performance issues. Again, not because they don't want to use memory, but because there's not enough supply with optics, and using that to form clusters on the chips that can still get you the same performance even if there's not the same amount of HBM. That's kind of been the big headline that's helped the optics names get some love. Amazon 276. This was at 284 last week. Took a little bit of a beating since then, but still holding well. I mean, it was at 228 right before earnings, so obviously it's made a massive move since then. And then Google, the Google news about, you know, Gemini being dead and all this stuff. I mean, again, I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but even if it is, I feel like GCP is going to win regardless of what model is the winner in the enterprise. And then after that, well, you know, the biggest thing about Google is like they serve as the application layer or as the cloud computing layer in a meaningful way that's growing at 80%. If they continue those growth rates, this is the chart that kind of caught my attention over the weekend. Free cash flow is going to be negative for about the next, call it 2 years. And then by 2029, it just explodes on all the hyperscalers. Alphabet, Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, Oracle. So even if Demis is leaving, or even if, you know, you had some controversy around management switch-ups and Gemini's not winning as much, the cloud and search business alone is enough for this thing to, I mean, eventually become a $10 trillion company. I wonder who's the first one that's going to hit 10 trillion, but I think by 2030, one of them is going to basically double from here, whether it's NVIDIA that would immediately get to 10 trillion or Google or Amazon. And we're going to see that happen. Microsoft 509. Remember, 550 was those highs back in July 2025. Jeff Bezos in advanced stocks to take a 30% stake in Liverpool FC. That actually might be the reason he's been selling Amazon. That might be the reason. Liverpool FC is worth about $6.5 billion. 30% stake would be a decent chunk of billions that Bezos would have to put up. Yeah, it's definitely not from Blue Origin then, if that's the case. Akamai is ripping because of their earnings of last week. I think Akamai is just getting a delayed reaction. Also, Cloudflare put out some really bullish stuff about agents on the internet. Again, more agents, bullish for Akamai. More agents, bullish for Fastly, bullish for Cloudflare. Agentic inference, 10xing, 100xing from here. You're just going to need a lot more of their services. Nebius right there, 194.78. Because that's great. LeBron has a stake in Liverpool? I thought he had a stake in a different soccer team. I feel like the soccer teams on average are worth more than a lot of other sports franchises. It's just soccer is just such a bigger sport. Let's get an update on SpaceX right here and see how some of the street is thinking of this price action.
Those situations, right, when everyone thinks the stock's going to go to 100 or 95, and you never actually get there, right? And so tactically what we did, you can just look at it, stock ran up to 200 after the IPO. We trimmed a little there, and then we bought some back on this kind of fears around the big lockup. But I think most importantly, we learned so much new information on their first earnings call, right? What did we learn? Path to $100 billion at ARR by year end. I mean, that's great news. Path to $1 trillion of revenue by 2030. And then probably most important in the short term is this path to 5 to 10 gigawatts of compute capacity next year. And Elon thinking that he can monetize it at $30 to $50 billion a gigawatt, which puts you at a few $100 billion run rate just on the AI compute infrastructure business for SpaceX. And so when you think about SpaceX, you really got to kind of divvy it up into its three pieces. You have space or launch, you have connectivity, and then you have AI infrastructure along with the 1P business, right? Grok and Cursor and all those great things. The terminal value is all driven by AI infrastructure. I love space and connectivity, but they're relatively small compared to the AI business and what I think of it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember from the IPO with $22.6 trillion TAM for enterprise AI, I believe was the number. I might be off by a bit, but roughly
What's
that.
a trillion between friends, David?
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of a trillion, though, Dom, I mean, it's only about 3.5 years, so we get to 2030. What gives you the confidence they can do a 10x on their top line in that time frame?
Well, let's see what happens, right? Elon, I think, has a tendency to have grandiose statements and eventually achieve them, but maybe a few years out. But regardless, whether or not he ends up hitting these exact targets, when I look at the street numbers, they look much lower than the potential forecast. And you can look out a few years and have a stock that's trading at just a mid-teens earnings multiple here, right? So what pieces am I most confident? I think Elon's probably one of the best in the world at standing up AI infrastructure. Jensen himself has said that. And I think this exclusivity deal has really allowed him to get premium preferred compute from NVIDIA. And that's a unique place to be. So whether he ends up renting it out to the labs like Anthropic, or whether he ends up renting it out to Google, or we see significant success with the combination of Cursor plus Grok, that kind of remains to be seen. And that really is actually quite a big difference on what the gigawatt economics are, right? If you own the model and you own the application, I mean, there's a path to like $80 billion a gigawatt of revenue. But if you're just renting out the infrastructure, maybe that number is closer to 30 to 50. So let's see where that ends up playing out over time. There's a really big, wide range of outcomes depending on how successful Cursor and Grok end up being. But the thing that I'm pretty confident is compute's in short supply right now, and they're bringing on a ton of it, and they should be able to monetize it at very strong ROICs.
I wanted to broaden it out a little bit because you say that the earnings season was an unabashed endorsement of AI return on invested capital, which has been one of the sort of nagging questions around all of this spending. Where do you look at that measure? Is it just revenue growth from the big hyperscalers, or are you looking at something else?
Well, I think revenue growth is a great place to start, right? But so AWS, 37% growth in the quarter. Microsoft Azure, 43%, going to 45% next quarter. And Google GCP, 82%. Now, the piece that really matters, though, is that Amazon and Google both put up those staggering growth rates at 50% plus incremental operating margins, right? So it's not just accelerating revenue growth, but it's EBIT margin expansion as well. And then not to mention just management commentary, right? Satya obviously shared that Morgan Stanley piece where it was close to 30% ROICs. And then Jassy talked about on the shortest term investment stuff, you know, the compute, the servers, the networking, that they're seeing, you know, 2 to 3 years to break even, and then another 2 to 3 years of cash flow. So I think the ROIC is there to continue investment. And why is that? It's because I think for frontier and near frontier intelligence, there's almost unlimited appetite from the enterprises of America. And you know, Ben Horowitz said maybe we're 3% penetrated in AI intelligence. I think that may be right.
Dom, if let's say all this does come together, you have SpaceX tracking to $1 trillion in revenue, and we're able to extrapolate the current growth rates of some of these hyperscalers, cloud businesses, that has to suggest that some other business models are getting obliterated. I mean, is there just enough for everyone to funnel that much capital and spending in that direction and not essentially, you know, really impair big parts of tech, or is it somehow all additive?
Well, I think we're clearly taking share within knowledge economy work, right? And so if you think about most businesses, I bet you their AI token consumption is like a low to mid-single digit percentage of their IT budget today. You know, most enterprises, not the technology natives. I think that could go to 50% of corporate IT budget, if not the entire IT budget over time. And so what does that mean? That means traditional application software companies, Salesforce, Workday, Adobe, even a ServiceNow, they just have a lot less dollars that they can go get because there's token growth that's going either to the labs or to the hyperscalers, right? When I did the Anthropic round last summer, Mike, they were doing $5 billion at ARR. What's the latest rumor? North of 70? Right? Yeah. There's been this insatiable demand for leading edge intelligence within the enterprise because everyone's trying to work smarter, work harder, accelerate their revenue, get EBIT margin expansion. And I think basically the area it's going to come from is two places. One is application software. Application software is in trouble. And, you know, we've owned a lot more semis than software for a while now. And then the second place is just making the American worker more productive, right? This is such an exciting time. You know, if you think about how big the coding market is, there's probably 30 million people in the world who write code for a living. You know, we make all of them 20% more productive. You're talking about making a $3 trillion GDP number 20% more productive. It's like $600 billion. I mean, it's a very, very big market. Now, doesn't mean we're not going to have pullbacks along the way, right? July was brutal. July was a really nasty correction. It was in the top 1% of momentum corrections after we had top 5% of momentum performances in June. So of course you're going to have these corrections along the way. It's about being able to navigate them responsibly for our clients.
I think the interesting thing right there is he's not necessarily wrong about a lot of that money leaving application software, which is obviously why IBM got hit pretty hard on the earnings. By the way, NVIDIA, dumpy dump on Mr. NVIDIA, 223 to 220 right here, down about 2%. But that's why the Palantir earnings were that much more special, right? Like if you're a software company and that narrative continues to exist, even if that narrative is unfair, that the semis will take away more spend from software, which, you know, in the context of IBM, it was literally proven to be the case, at least in the short term. You've got to have banger numbers. You got to have numbers that are so undeniable that the street looks at it and it's like, okay, maybe other software companies die, but that one's not dying. Microsoft 510. It's been a long time since we've seen Microsoft with a 5 handle. 510, almost a $4 trillion market cap. Palantir back above 177, trying to touch 178 right here. And so, you know, the semi-stack will continue to get love, continue to get momentum, but the best software companies that figure out how to architect their businesses around making workers more productive and actually delivering outcomes, I think are also going to get the market's attention, which is what we're seeing on a name like a Palantir. Rocket Lab 83, that one getting a bounce from 82 as SpaceX gets a bounce from 131 back to almost the IPO price at 135. SPY at 774. I don't have any updates from Micron's event. It should have already started. So I will get those as soon as we hear anything meaningful from Sanjay, if we do today. Oh, I'm already getting them. Okay, so a couple updates from Micron. Micron says customers remain largely insensitive to memory pricing. Data center demand is so strong that it can't meet even half of customer needs, and demand signals extend multiple years. Management did not specifically update quarterly guidance. Micron just went red. Micron says we are seeing multi-year signal on demands. We cannot meet half of the demand in data centers. Customers are not price sensitive to memory, but they are not increasing their quarterly guidance. I mean, they probably don't want to do that before earnings because it's going to, like, what's going to be the surprise on earnings if they announce an increase to their quarterly guide right now, right? So I think they will do that, but I think it'll happen on earnings itself. But, you know, the market probably wanted something like that. Something like that today. Yeah, weird. I'm not sure why Nvidia taking that hit. Same thing with AAOI. Came back. Dude, this stock went from 148 to 135, back to 148.90, now at 138. It's had like 4 different 8% swings in an hour. Something's going on with this stock. Something's happening here for it to be moving back and forth like this. Zeta, are we 27? We are 27. Not bad. 30 is the real benchmark for Zeta. Can we get above 30 and hold it? But obviously, I think the earnings have been strong enough to try to keep it there. You think SpaceX buys Tesla soon? I don't know if it's soon, but it's going to happen. There's no way it doesn't happen. I feel like Elon's made it pretty obvious that it's going to happen. It's a question of when. Oh, by the way, GameStop's likely pulling back their $56 billion eBay bid. I think GameStop is realizing it's not going to be easy to make that bid. Palantir, we're 10 cents away from 178. What's your trim target on Zeta? If you're trading it, I mean, probably above 30. I don't necessarily have a trim target though, because again, I think the stock's cheap at $7 billion, 4 times sales. But if you're trading it, like if you bought it at 27, yeah, like 30 is probably your target. I think 30 is going to be psychologically hard to get over there. You're going to need a catalyst. If you bought it at 21, it's at 27. I mean, that's your trade, right? That's $6. You make your money. But if you're holding it, I really do think there's room for that to run. It just, once again, a lot of these software names, they need their catalyst. Wow, Microsoft, $5.12. It's up $12 today. Completely in the gutter. They took it to $3.50 and now at $5.12. That's a good point, Garcia. The biggest reason SpaceX will buy Tesla is because Elon doesn't want to do 8 earnings calls per year. That's true. And if he gets Neuralink to go public, it's going to be 12 earnings calls per year. I think the dude's probably going to be tired. Did we touch 178? I don't see that we touched it. We are close. But I don't think we touched it yet. Hot take, FSD will become a commodity. You know, we talked about that yesterday with NVIDIA putting out Alpha Mayo and them effectively trying to, you know, sell intelligence around self-driving. Reddit goes down about 2%. Once again, FSD is amazing. I use it pretty much every week and it's incredible. So I have a very positive experience with it. But I don't know, if someone buys a Mercedes one day and it does the same thing that my Model Y does, then it does beg the question, what's the moat around that type of intelligence? IBM's still up about 1.4%. What do we think does better this week, CoreWeave or Nebius, if we had to pick on earnings? Are they both on the same day? Nebius is Wednesday. CoreWeave is tomorrow after hours. Do both go up, both go down? One goes up over the other? As AAOI continues to get hit, dude. That is just such a weird name today with price action. Last time Microsoft went this high, it fell off a cliff. Will that happen again? I do think a lot of the hyperscaler moves now are happening after a year's worth of serious results. And so same thing with Palantir. I think it's going to be more respected than not. Unless we get a market top on SPY, I don't think Microsoft has to go back to 450. I don't think Google has to go back to 250. I don't think Amazon has to go back to 220. Like, the earnings are now really being priced in, which means the multiple should at least hold, even if they don't expand from here. NVIDIA, 20 cents away from losing 220, as that one's getting sold off. The reason Micron's down is because, from my understanding, in their latest conference today, they did not increase the quarterly guide. I don't know if the street is that upset with them that they have to increase numbers every time they speak, but I think that's why it took a little bit of a hit. Robinhood trying to get to 94. Do you have an end of year price target on Zeta? Not really. I just didn't think it deserved to be in the low 20s. Like, ideally, I think it should make a move above 30. And 35 is kind of the, I guess, DCF price target, you could say, consistent with some of the analysts, but I don't think it has to get to 30 by the end of the year. I think it'd be way above that, or I think it'd be kind of stuck in this 27 to 29 range. I just don't think it, the low 20s, 19, 18. I think that era hopefully is over. Same thing with Shopify. Like, I don't think Shopify is going back to 110, 115. Like, go back to 135-ish. But I think a lot of these names have evolved. Even Netflix. I don't know if Netflix is going back to the 60s. I mean, it's still a blue chip stock that will have reoccurring cash flows regardless of their content problems. So I think Netflix, maybe a lot of the pain got baked in. Neuralink is going to become a part of Tesla at some point because the robots can be controlled by Neuralink. I think that's on the right side of it. Neuralink is one of the hottest private companies to get access. I've tried. It's just like, it's not available. It's really hard to get access to Neuralink, especially if you don't want to pay like an absolute absurd premium. And even if you do want to pay an absurd premium, it's hard to get exposure to it. So Neuralink is one of those that I think a lot of people believe could be legitimately his most valuable company ever. Now, obviously, SpaceX is up there, but I mean, Neuralink could be solving some really intense issues. And the economic value on that could be absolutely gigantic. Palantir, there she goes, 178. There's the breakout, $427 billion market cap on Mr. Palantir. She continues to make a move. What a freaking week, dude. 43% in a week. I mean, that's a massive increase. The stock's still red year to date. That's how high up it was in January. And it's just been, oh no, now it just flipped. Okay, Palantir is positive now year to date. About 5%, 6% year to date. All right, so we flipped. Officially green year to date. It's like a 43% week, but here we go. We are green. Fastly, Akamai again. Those earnings last week were really good. Cloudflare report today on agents taking over the internet. Really good for the overall CDN environment. Microsoft 512, so it makes sense that they're getting a bid. Robinhood 93.72. Grab down 1%. Uber's up 3. DRAM's down 1. Adobe's up 1. Intuit up 1. Do you think Rocket Lab 165 covered calls are safe for mid-December? I would think so. I don't know if this thing doubles by mid-December. Even if it does, I think you'll be able to roll those calls without worrying too much. But yeah, I think 165 is not crazy. Now, granted, SpaceX goes to 200. Rocket Lab's probably going up. But I think it kind of depends on SpaceX. It's funny how things switched from AI build out to the names that were disrespectful. Yeah, but that's also kind of what a lot of us thought would happen, right? Like, at some point, the Palantirs of the world, the Microsofts of the world got so destroyed for reasons that didn't seem to make sense. And if you've been buying the dip on these names, Reddit, Shopify, Palantir, like Amazon, these incredible companies, they just needed some time to rely. And that doesn't mean Nebius and Micron are done. It just means, like, some of the power shifted away and more balanced portfolios are getting some. I mean, ServiceNow was at $80 for the majority of the past couple months. It's at 124. It's a massive move. I think it's normal that we've seen a bit of retreatment and spreading of of the allocation of capital. Meta right there, 604. And it proves that if you look at the heat map on the S&P, you're seeing a lot. Financials, healthcare, consumer discretionary, like a lot of the S&P has benefited from this broadening out narrative. And that, like, it makes sense. It's like the market is not meant for one sector to like go up and up and up every single day parabolically and have every other sector go red in the face of that. Like, especially when that sector is the most cyclical sector historically. Obviously, the cycle is a lot bigger this time, but you need other parts to participate. So it makes sense. The problem was June, with leverage, got just so many people into that semiconductor trade. And that's what created that July meltdown. But in that meltdown came some incredible opportunities. I mean, it was one day in July. I don't know what day it was, but pound trade 125. And it was just like, I wrote a post on X, but it was just like, this is stupid. Like, this is becoming really stupid. This is after they had one of their latest case studies come out about working with a customer. It's like, the market is being dumb here. Google at 315 after earnings, after growing 82%, like, it was stupid. Reddit at 135, like a lot of this stuff didn't make sense. And I think the market's probably being stupid on memory right now. Like, Micron probably does not deserve to be below 1,000 right here. But because it's just so much up for the year and so many of those other names, didn't move, you're starting to see a little bit of a shift. Yeah, Uber's been dumb all year. And it's finally getting a little bit of love. TSM making a move. Black Sky got upgraded today. That's why that stock's up 4%. I have not seen Wayne's World yet. Eventually, I will watch it. I've just been learning more about Freddie Mercury. His interviews are awesome, dude. His interviews are crazy. Let me check 180 resistance on pound here. Lumentum really getting hit right here. 179 is 36,000 shares. 180, 213,000 shares. If we break through that, we're going to get some love. Spotify, they also had a really good earnings last week as well. Ended up falling 5%, but Spotify's earnings were not bad. 509.49. That is up 4. Let's get another update on some of the labor market stuff from last week as well.
Some things to look at as deeper into the headline number. And one of those was construction. That was a bright spot, and it has not been a bright spot for a while. And I think it does speak to all the investment and spending and building on AI data centers. That was a 22,000 increase for manufacturing construction jobs. That's good to see, right, for the economy. The White House is going to be happy about that one. The other chart I wanted to highlight that people are kind of scratching their heads over. So we did see the unemployment rate come down 4.1%, but it was for the wrong reason. It was because labor force participation continues to come down and is now at the lowest level since 2021. And so some people are wondering about that. Is that AI? Or people just being discouraged and leaving the workforce? I'll just say one thing, which is the St. Louis Fed did have a paper on this recently. The methodology this is a boring, unsatisfactory answer, but the methodology changed in terms of gathering this data and reporting this data. I would also say that the share of the population for older Americans is increasing.
That's a huge part.
And that is a big part of it as well. And that, those people eventually drop out of the labor force. So that could be disproportionately impacting it, which is all just to say it's never as simple as just, the negative headline number and the 4.1% unemployment rate, all things that the Fed has to consider. The last one I would think that the Fed is going to be watching carefully is the wage numbers, the average hourly earnings, which were pretty benign. If we really have this kind of inflation price spiral that the Fed should be traditionally worried about with higher inflation, you would typically see higher wages as well to sort of, higher wages. People have to pay more for stuff as well. So they're getting paid, but they have to spend more on inflation. Not seeing it in the wage numbers. So there are questions about how big of an inflation problem we ultimately have where the Fed would need to fight it. We'll get CPI on Wednesday.
There's a lot of play in terms of scrutinizing the report. I mean, first of all, prime age labor force participation, which is measured separately, it's 25 to 54, actually ticked higher in the month, just slightly. It's 83.4%. So that's not really alarming. And then there was a lot of, I guess, picking apart the seasonal adjustment factors. It was leisure and hospitality, and it was state education and things like that were particularly weak. Maybe
Leisure
that's
get
going to
back
come
to
out in the
World Cup.
wash. But I think it's a function of, we know that we're at a pretty kind of low hire, low fire world. The break even for job creation to keep the unemployment rate low is minimal. And so you're going to kind of pop above and below zero in a given month, and it's not going to really represent a change in trend. So I don't know. I don't know if it changed too much, the Fed story, because I don't think any of the folks on the Fed that are now leaning toward a hike are doing so because they're saying the labor market's too tight and wage growth is going to cause cost push inflation. It's much more because, look, core services or whatever you want to talk about, a core inflation
Super
ex housing is still above trend or something like that. So interesting, though, that
I do wonder
you
how
changed
much,
the narrative pretty quickly.
I mean, I do wonder how much Kevin Warsh, the new Fed chairman, can get away with this strategy where the financial conditions, the markets do the tightening for him. You know, his rhetoric and the financial conditions do the work, where he doesn't ultimately have to raise interest rates. Because remember, he was hired by President Donald Trump to not raise interest rates, which I'm not saying is why he wouldn't do it, because he's made it very clear he's independent and he's going to do what they think is in the best interest. But it's an interesting strategy, letting the markets do the work so that the Fed doesn't have to, and whether that can ultimately work.
Yeah, I think the question coming out of the press conference was, after the first meeting with him as chairman, he was happy to see long-term yields come in. Everyone said, oh, this is perfect because now we have credibility on inflation. And if you just kind of rubber stamp the market's message, no matter what the market's message is, it's hard to know where you intend things to go, I guess.
If oil keeps coming down, it doesn't look like the 25% of Fed participants. By the way, Pounter 179, folks, is going to continue to be 25 to 30% of the Fed that wants to vote for a hike. And I think Warsh effectively bought a decent chunk of time. And Trump, there was a report last week that Trump's been talking to Warsh. And so I think Warsh on those phone calls is saying, dude, like, I can only hold out for so long. You really got to get oil down, or else at some point I'm going to be outnumbered here and we're going to have to hike. And maybe that's part of the reason why Trump has, switched his mind as well. Shout out to Sachin, OG Palantard right here. We're trying to go for 180, folks. She is trying to go for 180. Sachin has been on the journey for the past 5 years with all of us. On Mr. Pounter, 179.43. Jack, thank you for the super chat. Deeply, deeply appreciate that. Pounter is and will be one of the biggest takeaways from your channel. I bought the dip at 110, allocated 10% of my portfolio. Wow. 10% of my maximum threshold for individual stocks. Congrats, man. That I think 107 was the absolute low this year. And I mean, this is the first year where I've really started buying that. I mean, I didn't buy the dip at all last year because there weren't really any dips to buy. But this year, 125 to 130, a little bit in the 140s was kind of my main dip buys. And I think a lot of people that just knew what they held saw the first 3 earnings of the year that got disrespected, and they were the best earnings in software history. Like, at some point, the market needed to reflect on that. And this last earnings we got was the one the market could ignore. And that's what had all these dip buys get rewarded. It's cool, man. It's cool. You start to see a lot of excitement from the market when you're on the right side of the story. And again, from a token consumption perspective, I really just think that Pounter's on the right side of explaining why their business model is far superior to the other AI companies. I mean, if Anthropic and OpenAI are trillion-dollar companies, Pounter should be as well, because you're talking about real sustainable growth that meaningfully can actually deliver outcomes for the enterprise and for the American worker. But we're getting to the point where valuations, Pounter tries approaching $500 billion. That's where macro is going to be more important than just earnings. When it was stuck at 120, it was more about their execution. I think now it might be more about macro. And that's going to be up to Trump. But if he wants a good end of year, I think Trump getting rid of this war can really help a lot of things reflect. Meta right there, 607, as that continues to go up. CoreWeave's up a bit right here. Nebbia's still trying to make a move. We were at 195. Nebbia's 193.40. CrowdStrike also massive move today as well. There you go, 223. Coherent, I still don't get why they dumped Photonics, but maybe that was the plan all weekend, as all of those names out the gate took your hit. Galv says I added at 124, first time at buying since 16 a share. Yeah, honestly, a lot of people to this year, it was their first time adding in a long time. I was talking to a couple of people over the weekend that said the same thing. Like, those dips were at 120, 130. And, one could argue 120, 130 conventionally it was still expensive. But if you knew they were about to deliver the quarter that they just delivered, the street was not going to care. Like, this was the type of earnings that you can guide for that type of growth, and you're on the right side of the broader AI story. Like, you're going to get people that want to take part of that and play a role. And I think that's what we saw, which is why a lot of those dip buys were rewarded. CrowdStrike still up 4, Oracle now up 2 as well. Iran spokesperson today mentioned the expected date of the negotiations. We can reach an understanding with Oman, which is not far off. U.S. is escalating tensions, which are still ongoing. The Strait of Hormuz cannot be considered secure until previous violations are addressed. The Strait of Hormuz security depends on aggressors ending military actions against Iran and compensating for previous violations. Okay, so they effectively want reparations, which they've been asking for a while. I don't know, man. I don't know what the U.S. is going to capitulate on. Oil still at $80.50. You're not seeing oil come down. Someone just bought $1 million into Cerebras calls, 320, expiring September. 320? Goodness. It's at 230. I don't know. They're going to get a deal with Anthropic or something. Someone's pretty freaking bullish. By the way, SpaceX is launching new Starlink satellites. It's not live yet, but if they officially launch them, we'll flip over and see what it looks like. Is it Kathy Wood? Dude, she's been buying the crap out of the SpaceX dip. I don't know if she's even on the shares, but it's up from the low 100s. So a lot of her dip buys have been rewarded. Epsilon, are we still moving? 939. We are still moving on that one. Josiah says Palantir is now over 50% of my portfolio because my average is under 15. Yeah, some of these names you just buy and hold. And you just don't worry about it. You just don't worry about it. I mean, the amount of NVIDIA investors that have just gotten filthy rich off literally buying and holding, just letting it happen. It's been pretty incredible. I think the other thing is just like, some of these winners really make you analyze what is a good quality company. What are the tenets of a company that has serious good qualities that you're willing to take a chance on, that you believe in? Management, TAM, execution, ability to pivot, allocation of capital. Like, some of these things, these investments kind of just teach you, and you try to make sure every other investment kind of fits those same characteristics. AMD down 1%. Usually the stock prices, take care of themselves. Ondas still up here today, 939. You see, again, a lot of these names that were dead for the past few weeks, if not months, they are indeed coming back. That's the other cool thing about the market. It's like you're never out until you're officially out. Like, until your stock gets delisted, there's always a chance that you could come back, you could do something, you have a good earnings, you change the narrative. There's always something that's out there that can bring back instant liquidity. I mean, Epsilon has basically been doing nothing for like 3 months, and then boom, massive results, massive earnings growth. Market cares. And it could happen at any moment to any of these stocks. Just, their destiny is in their hands to execute, because the liquidity of the public markets is so abundant that any good reason, I mean, people need to put their money somewhere, right? This is why US stocks get all the love. Like, people need to put their money somewhere. You can either put it in commodities, Real estate, crypto, bonds, or equities. And equities tend to be more exciting based on, something being up 4% today after being up 40% last week, instead of having to wait a year for a 4% return from a 10-year. So equities will always drive interest, but the question is, do those equities have the sustainable power to keep that interest alive, to continue allowing it to compound? Yeah, Allbirds. Where is that stock? That stock, $2.57. So it ran up to 24. To 17. It went from $1.50 to 17. Now it's at 2.50. They definitely reinvented themselves. But it's obviously not in the high quality bucket, I would say, of companies. T1 still down another 7% here today. Red Cat, is that moving? That's up 7%. All your drone names getting a little bit of love. PayPal, that rejected the offer the other day. That's down flat. Dents, thank you for the super chat. Congrats on waking up to Freddie Mercury from his grave. And thanks for the yapping on Palantir. Dude, Freddie Mercury is an icon. I've really started watching all of his stuff. I think I've listened to Bohemian Rhapsody like 20 times over the weekend, dude. But now, don't get me wrong. The first part and the last part of the song are not like my cup of tea, but that middle part, I mean, I've been yelling "Mama" all weekend, bro, all weekend. It's such a short part, but like the lyrics are so deep. Like when you really think about it, the lyrics are so deep, or they're not deep. It's based on how you interpret it. But like, I think it's definitely up there. It's definitely top 10. Palantir 179.20, 180 again, 213,000 shares. Waiting there. Bro made that song his whole personality now. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're not getting anything from this Micron meeting other than what I told you guys. Customers remain largely insensitive to memory pricing. Did not specific update quarterly guidance. That's pretty much what we got. He also said supply will be tighter in 2027. That's not necessarily something too different. So still getting not a ton of new attention. AAOI, goodness gracious, dude. 129. Touched 150 twice today, basically, and now goes red. That is so weird, dude. Yeah, AEHR has to fall with it. They're in the same bucket. It is over 100, though. This thing was at like 50 last month. Rocket Lab just lost everything. That means SpaceX is probably struggling a little bit. Down from 136, but SpaceX at least still somewhat green. I feel like today is one of those kind of choppy but stuck in a range type of days. More than anything, some of your names are getting more pushback, like Photonics. Everything else, Salesforce up, SoFi is down a little bit. I think we get that rate cut in September. I mean, we're probably not, but if we don't get the hikes, SoFi is going to be a $20 stock. It just needs the path to a rate cut, and Trump can make that happen really quickly if this Iran thing is over. ASML losing a lot of its gains this week after the Microsoft news came out. Microsoft also losing some gains, but still well above 500. Trump is not live today. I don't think so. I don't think he is supposed to be live today. Trump hasn't really started campaigning that aggressively for the midterms either. I know he did one campaign rally last week, but it's August. We have 3 months left. I would imagine less than 3 months. I would imagine in the next few weeks he's going to be out there starting to campaign a lot more. I still have not listened to Tool. You guys have been telling me for years to listen to Tool. I have not. NVIDIA loses 220. but I have started listening to Queen. Oil almost at 81. Yeah, Nebius and Micron. If NVIDIA is falling, it's going to be hard for them to hold. I also still haven't listened to Metallica. Again, I'm not like a heavy metal rock type of guy, but like Bohemian Rhapsody got to me. Interesting. You're seeing... Where's AppLovin? Dude, this thing is cheap. I don't care what anyone says. AppLovin is cheap. It's one of those names that I think requires some diligence. It's just the sector it's in is a little cranky with advertising, but AppLovin is like, okay, maybe they're not dirt cheap, but they're growing at 65%. They trade at 21 times. I mean, you know, most companies that trade at 21 times are not growing at 3x that multiple, and they're doing it incredibly profitably. Now, I think there are some SBC issues. They filed some weird 8K during the earnings. They didn't mention on the earnings, so I don't know that much about the company. But looking at the top line, this was an $800 stock last year, and I don't know if that 800 was fake. I just think the SaaS meltdown killed everything, and this one's yet to really recover. Yeah, PEG is less than 1. Palantir's PEG was just at about 1 at 125. So, you know, sustainable, meaningful growth with decent multiples kind of allows that expansion to happen better. I have listened to Ozzy Osbourne. There's one song I listened to. I think I heard it on a commercial like 15 years ago, and I've loved that song ever since. I Don't Want to Stop. That song by Ozzy Osbourne, oh my gosh. It's like a top 20 song for me personally. I haven't listened to his other stuff, but I Don't Want to Stop by Ozzy Osbourne, amazing. Uncle Jesse, thank you for the super chat. Sold my house in 2020. I YOLO'd Palantir. Senior mom's retirement portfolio also YOLO'd. Bus driver friend retirement account YOLO'd. Your bids helped me stay the course when I thought I ruined my entire family's life. Dude, sometimes you got to risk it for the biscuit. Congratulations. I mean, look, it's a different thing where you like risk retirement portfolios and all this stuff on like short-term options and literally can lose everything because of timing. It's another thing when you, pick a stock and just believe so deeply in it and hope that the stock eventually plays. I mean, my sister bought a house this year because of Palantir as well. Like, I bought her a ton of Palantir in her portfolio because she finally trusted me to manage it back in 2024 at $20. And that was part of the way that she funded the down payment on her house. So like, I totally feel the comparison of having the pressure with telling your family or friends to take a chance on a stock. That's why it's always tough to tell family and friends, because if it doesn't work out, which you're not going to always bat 100, right? There's going to be some stocks that don't work out. And if they go super heavy on it, it's always an awkward conversation. But when it really does work out and you really, really do believe in it, it's always fun. Because sometimes, it can really change lives. Sachin says, SoFi for now is in a bad position as far as technicals are considered, as the close above the 200 simple moving average, and this is when the stock becomes explosive. The way the pattern looks like it will be October. Yeah, and that could line up with the potential for maybe not rate hikes or cuts, but definitely the probabilities of rate hikes slowing down in 2027, which would effectively be cuts, and that's where the market would price in, SoFi getting some love. Like I told you guys, I have a friend who has 100,000 shares of NVIDIA, and in 2016, he told his average is like $2. He told everyone he could possibly tell to buy NVIDIA. Like, he showed me his text messages from 2016, texting his mom and his parents, his brother and his friends, like, dude, buy NVIDIA, buy NVIDIA, buy. And he was he was 8 years early before the real explosion happened. Like, NVIDIA had some mini explosions around that time, but like the crypto stuff, but then it just came crashing down. And he held through it all until AI and ChatGPT became a thing. And that was us with Palantir, right? In 2021, 2022, it was like we knew this thing would be special, but we needed like the market to shift. We needed Palantir. When Sham talked about KLLM, again, he was so early. Like, Palantir's ontology literally, like they told the future. It's like the LLMs won't matter. It's going to be the application of the LLMs. And they had the early versions of that. And it just took the market about a year to kind of catch on. And then boom, everything changes. Uber 77 still up 2.7% today. Yeah, he's still holding. He was going to sell on the last earnings if NVIDIA got to like 260. That was his plan. Then NVIDIA dumped. I haven't talked to him since then, though. But I would imagine, given his conviction, he didn't sell in July. I mean, he's been through a lot of those moments. But 260, 270 is kind of his price where he actually wants to take profits. I don't know if we get there end of year, but if AI is only going to increase, NVIDIA will eventually become a $10 trillion company. So we'll have that opportunity. But it's just hard. It's just hard to hold on. It's hard to believe. And it's hard to take the burden of getting other people to believe as well. But, it can change so much. What else do we have right here? 11 a.m. JP Morgan says SK Hynix 15% weekly share price decline reflected concerns over HBM pricing, but they view the sell-off as overdone. Dude, these sell sides keep coming out with something bearish on memory, but then they say we still think it's cheap. I feel like they're kind of in the middle. That's why these memory stocks aren't really rallying. Because all the analysts are like, look, it's cheap, but we're still concerned that it might top out soon, but it's cheap, which is why their price targets are like 50% above the current prices. You're just not getting that type of exuberance from Wall Street or from retail, quite frankly. NVIDIA below 220 to keep getting these names to bump. What is the next Palantir? I don't know. I have been searching for that name for a long time. Ever since Palantir. I mean, we found Hood. Hood is not the next Palantir, but it kind of did the same thing. 6 to 150, 7 to 150. I mean, it did the same. I mean, it is the closest thing I have found to a Palantir in terms of management, execution, TAM, and then stock price reaction. Because at the end of the day, the market has to buy the stock to have it have that same type of result. And granted, Palantir's moat is just so much more sophisticated than Hood's, given the way they operate in the enterprise. It's also hard to compare them. One's financial services, one is AI enterprise, B2B software. But like, if you were to compare like the actual value proposition, it's hard. It's easier to leave Hood as a brokerage versus hard to leave Palantir as software. Granted, I will never leave Hood as a brokerage because I just think the user experience is too good, which was part of my thesis when it was $7. Having said that, I do not know what is the next one. I don't think it's Grab. I've said that for a long time. The price target on Grab has always been 10. I still think it's deeply undervalued. I think Grab will have its day. The goal of Grab has never been to be a 10x, but I thought a double is possible. I still think a double is possible. It's a year and a half into the journey. And look, when I look at the earnings, I think inevitably it's going to happen because you just can't compound that type of growth without the street recognizing it. That's effectively what happened to Hood and Palantir over the past couple of years. It's just their earnings were so massive. Their operating leverage was so massive. They ended up 20xing. I don't think that happens to Grab, but I don't think it's crazy to say $8 to $10 that's possible. Zeta is amazing. The problem is I don't know if Zeta has the type of operating leverage that can become a Hood or Palantir over the next 20 years, especially because their TAM and advertising, it's a big TAM. I don't know if it's like multi-trillion-dollar TAM. So, NVIDIA's already played out all the neo clouds when they were $3-4. They effectively did the 10-15x move, but you had to buy them when they were Bitcoin miners that were on the brink of bankruptcy, or you had to know about Russian search engines to find Nebius when it was like $10-15, right? So in terms of a pure play company that can do what a Palantir and Hood has done, yeah, maybe it's a robotics company. It's just I still think robotics is a bit far away. I understand Zeta's at 7 billion. I don't know if it's going to go to 70 billion. I think it can go to like 20 and 25, but for it to get to 100 billion, I've noticed the 100 billion market cap it's less about earnings. It's less about earnings. Case in point, Rocket Lab, which by the way, Rocket Lab basically pulled a Hood and Palantir as well. So I mean, like if we're talking about now, it's already happened. I know people asking for what's the next one, but like Rocket Lab was there with them over the past 3 years. Like Rocket Lab got to 100 billion. It did not have the earnings to justify it, but there was something about its execution, something about its founders, something about its ability to galvanize attention, something about its TAM that attracted the street that got it to 100 billion, not the earnings. And eventually I think the earnings will catch up as well, but that 100 billion number is special, and it's tough to get there without having a lot of other ingredients besides just earnings. Look, maybe it's Upsellera, but with biotechs, again, they've got to really create incredible products and continue to save lives with that, which could happen. It's a $2 billion company with 50x to get to 100, which is possible in the drug space. It's just, that type of risk is less risk that you can map out. It's purely based on the science and if the drugs work. So it's a bit tougher to see it potentially playing out. Maybe it's quantum. Maybe it is quantum. The U.S. government's starting to support it a lot more. A lot of these quantum stocks have made a big move from like 50 cents to $1, now trading at 15, 20 bucks. Still, under 10 billion. Do they get to 100 billion if quantum becomes a thing? Maybe. But it's just not easy to find them, dude. It's not easy to find those names that have such high quality leadership and execution. And I realize when you find them, you just hold on. You don't really care that much about the nitty gritty. You don't care about trading them. You just hold on. Like if you bought Tesla 10 years ago, you're pretty happy, regardless of some of the price action past couple of years. SpaceX 136, that continues to make a move, because that's up 2%. Archer, is Archer still down for the year? I know it's having a nice day. Archer, Joby, all those names took a hit. They were up in January. Archer year to date is down 20% still after the move today. Yeah, I mean, for Archer, mobility is a massive TAM. Defense is a massive TAM. I just think the execution on Archer's side has been lacking the past couple of years. Past couple of months, it's been a lot more exciting. But there still haven't been that many commercial flights, which is also what I think the street has been waiting to see more evidence of. SanDisk still up 3%. SMCI still up 4%. Oscar had a great earnings. Does anyone know why that name sold off? I still don't get why it sold off from 37 or 36. Was that just algos? That was weird because those earnings were pretty freaking incredible. Google still 350 here, 353 on the day. Archer might do an offering with this, right? Yeah, that's a good point. They've done this before. If they do an offering today, it definitely would hurt some of that momentum. They do have a lot of cash. Don't they have like a couple billion in cash? Like, I don't think they would need to do an offering. We'll find out after the bell. All right, so we have Rocket Lab, ASTS, and HIMS today. After the bell, I will be back on the close, and we're going to see what happens with these names. Rocket Lab now going red right here. ASTS also going red. Last earnings, they both crushed it. I think ASTS took the hit. Rocket Lab got a 10-15% move. So question will be how they continue to show up. We talked about the Iran stuff. Talked about oil up. I have listened to Dancing Queen before. Dancing Queen is one of those songs where I feel like you can't avoid. It's like, it's in pop culture. But I probably need to listen to a lot more of these 70s and 80s classics that I've missed. By the way, our boy Jason, I believe he'll be live tomorrow with us. Take a look at that. Market's about to open. I'm closed. The reason is cooler than I'll ever be. Look at that. Charlie has been the new addition to the family for Paper Gains. Actually, I actually don't know if Jason can make Technical Tuesday tomorrow. I'll ask him, but he actually might be busy. But I think he should be okay. So there you go. A brand new baby added to the family. I'm very happy for him. And I'm happy he got back right in time. He had a feeling. His wife was going to go into labor while he was away. And he got back right before it happened. SpaceX still 135. S&P, mini gains. Yes. Mini paper gains. 773. S&P just flat. I have not listened to Guns N' Roses. I've heard of Guns N' Roses. Not listened to them. I know what they are. I've got a lot of listening to do. But at least I've entered into the Bohemian Rhapsody world, and we'll see where it goes from there. And don't act like it's that crazy that I haven't listened to Guns N' Roses, dude. It's not that crazy. It's not like that crazy. Like, it's bad, but it's not that bad. I don't think it's that bad. Oh, Welcome to the Jungle. That's Guns N' Roses? I've heard that song before. Okay, so I have listened to these guys. I've listened to, I just didn't know I was listening to them. Yeah, I've heard these songs. Like, I've heard We Will Rock You. I didn't know that was Queen. But give me a little bit of a break, okay? We're gonna get this cultural education over time. Word of the day, convexity. A relationship where outcomes become disproportionately larger as the underlying conditions improve. Small changes can eventually produce outsized effects. The company had a hidden convexity. Modest improvements in adoption could translate into enormous gains in scale. November rain. Dude, we need to do like song of the day instead of, honestly, song of the day would be so much more helpful for my cultural awareness than word of the day, because I forget every word of the day, to be honest. Like, we low-key should have a song of the day, and then I listen to it after the market open. I tell you guys what I think about it on the close. That way I can sound more educated about this stuff. All right, folks, that's it for me. We'll be back on the close. Thank you all for joining. We got a packed week ahead of us. Rocket Lab, ASTS, HIMS after the bell. We'll see if some of this oil stuff can calm down. Starlink launching a bunch of satellites or SpaceX launching these Starlink satellites in a couple of hours, if not in the next 30 minutes. We'll see how the street thinks about some of this the Micron updates we're getting. And then Intel, again, with the 5% down move on 15 billion. We'll also see how the street thinks of some of these equity raises towards the end of the day. SpaceX still holding on to the 130s. Accelera holding on to a 34% move. Palantir, 180 is not that far away, but we just got to see if the street gives this to us. And by the end of the day, hopefully we get there. I have not heard that much Led Zeppelin either. Okay, we're gonna figure out a way for me to listen to a lot of this stuff. But if you haven't listened to Basis Points, especially the first 4 minutes of it, you talk about wanting to consume good music. I would recommend doing so. I think you'll enjoy it. All right, that is it. I'll be back on the close. Rocket Lab, ASTS, and HIMS. We got loaded up, and then we will keep going from there. All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. I'll see you guys on the close in a few hours. Bye, everybody. Have a good one.